of the Public Amenities Commission, Monday, October 7th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. We'd like to do a roll call. Commissioner Caldwell,
Present.
Commissioner Lang,
Here.
Commissioner Galassi,
Present.
Commissioner Morocco,
Here.
Commissioner McCauley,
Here.
Commissioner Rowe,
Here.
Commissioner Youssef Z.
Here.
Thank you. I'd like you to please stand and join me in I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we'll move, what we want to do now is, normally this would be done by the chair, but we don't have a chair yet. So we want to approve the order of agenda. Are there any comments on the order of the agenda? No, okay, thank you. We did want to.
Can I make a motion to
Yes.
approve the order of the agenda?
Yes.
Second the
please.
motion.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Do you have to vote on that? Nick? Okay.
Yeah.
I think we go all in favor. Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. On to blue folder items, there were a couple of items submitted. I suppose we need to make a motion to receive and file those items.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Now we move on to the consent calendar. I don't think there are any items on the consent calendar.
I move we approve the consent calendar, which consists of affidavit of posting.
Oh, thank you.
Second.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any items excluded on the consent calendar?
No.
Then we move to public participation on non-agenda items.
You should have comments from,
Do we have any
I know there's
comments?
one thing in the blue folder item that came in that you put in there, but
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
So there are no comments there, okay. So we
Aye.
can move forward. There are no e-comments received. Items continued from previous agendas, none. Items for discussion prior to action. Then we should be able to move to election of officers, which is, I think, my favorite part.
there is a protocol that the
Oh, yeah,
city
go ahead.
uses, but
Yes.
it's not in our packet.
Okay,
The first thing is we ask for anybody interested in being nominated. We
Okay.
vote on it, then we go to the next one.
Okay.
We don't have bylaws, so I don't know if we're electing 2 or 3 today. But, if we wanted a secretary, we could do that too, and that would end up being part of the bylaw discussion.
anyone
So-
want to make a motion, or yeah?
So do you have the bylaw discussion first and then?
Well, I don't
How it
think we're
should have
going to be
gone?
able to do a bylaw
Yeah, it's not
today.
agenda. It's not agenda as we can.
It's actually on the agenda, but we got different choices to make.
Oh, it is. It's J2.
So chairman, vice
I'll
chairman, and
volunteer to
possible
be chair.
secretary, is that right?
Thank you.
Right.
So we have one nomination for chair?
I'd volunteer too.
Okay. Any other discussion?
If you could repeat who had volunteered. I know I got one right here.
That was Commissioner Morocco and Commissioner Youssef Z. We need a chair and a vice chair.
You can do them together, you can do it separately.
Okay.
So
Anyone want to make a motion?
Can I ask if either of the volunteers would prefer one or the other?
Do you want to have a preference?
Would you prefer one or the
I
other?
don't care. If you're going to be here all the time, I'm fine with that.
I'm here all the time.
Great. Why don't you come over here?
You got to vote on it.
Okay.
I make a motion to vote on the chairman, which would be,
He wants to be chair.
oh, you volunteered already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, volunteer.
I'll-
Just so all we have to do is say all in favor. Gotcha. Okay, I didn't catch
And
that,
I
sorry.
volunteered to take the vice
Gotcha,
chair.
gotcha.
So can we have a motion on the floor for an appointee of chair and vice chair and then see if someone seconds and we'll vote on it?
Yes, I move to appoint Commissioner Youssef Zai as chairman and Commissioner Morocco as co-chair,
Vice chair.
vice chair.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
All right.
Excellent, thank you.
Gonna hit me with it or?
Oh, this is it's the handoff.
I don't need it.
Sir, you need this, sir. Ceremonial pounding of the wood.
You need to take over running the agenda.
Dana, do you want to continue? Should I
No, please.
All right, now slam the gavel.
now slam the gavel? All right, we're moving on to item J2, discussion and possible action regarding the Public Amenities Commission's bylaws and subcommittee appointments.
So included in the packet were the bylaws from the previous commissions. The thought there is that they'll probably be evaluated. There could potentially be a subcommittee to evaluate and bring back a set of bylaws for discussion at a future meeting. Being that obviously it's the commission's amalgamation, it's probably going to have to take a lot of information from those other former bylaws and bring back an item for discussion. It's probably going to take more than at least one meeting to have that discussion. And then in addition to that, once it's approved by the commission, then it has to go to our city attorney for review to make sure that it is meets all the necessary code and laws to come back then for approval. Then it would go, I think, to council for a final approval.
Okay, do we have any items of consideration for bylaws, any direction from city staff of things that the commission should consider as a part of the bylaws or recommendation for bylaws?
Not at this juncture, but I do think that if a subcommittee was created, they would probably meet with staff and have those discussions.
Is there any way we could request a recommendation for bylaws from the staff and then use that as a jumping off point?
Sure.
I was
Yeah,
under
see
the
why not.
assumption for the library commission, for example, the one you presented us was the one that the city clerk said was no good. So I was under the impression that the city clerk was trying to come up with some standard form bylaw for all the commissions. Is that going forward at all, or are we just supposed to put something together ourselves?
Well, I mean, I would have to check with the city clerk on that. I think there are certain components that, again, once they're reviewed, have to be standardized, but there are certain, I'm sure if you're taking a look at some of the other bylaws regarding the other commissions, there are ones that are specific to those commissions. So if so moved, I could talk to city staff and we could see if we can come up with a recommendation and maybe try to reverse engineer it where we bring back the items that are essential for those commissions. And then, we can have another discussion in the future about the fine details. But I think at this juncture, we, in order to move forward, we would have to determine what the essentials are from each of those former commission bylaws, bring those into a new set of bylaws, and then have that discussion and to move that forward for review. So I'm fine with pursuing that if that's something you would like to do. If you think that would be easier, more straightforward, we could do that.
I think I'm leaning towards that because we're a consolidation of 4 separate commissions, and we need to
Right.
incorporate bylaws or mandatory requirements for each of the 4 to have a final draft of what we're going to adopt as the bylaws. Because this item is consolidated also with subcommittee appointments, I think perhaps we move on to the second part of this discussion item to see if there's any recommendations for subcommittees, and then we'll make a motion to continue the discussion on bylaws and see if we can subsequently adopt the subcommittee appointments as well.
Sounds excellent, thank you.
The one piece that we are missing is the ordinance actually has pieces from each of the commissions in it, and perhaps that should be part of the discussion at some point.
Yeah. Does anybody want to make recommendations for the creation of certain subcommittees to incorporate the former 4 commissions? Anything? I know we have a lot of people coming from different commissions for this, so any projects or anything from former commissions that, you know, we have recommendations for to continue as subcommittees?
We, on the Preservation Commission, we had a minor alterations subcommittee that I think has to move forward.
That is correct. That will be a part of my presentation
Those are-
for preservation. But yes, the minor alteration subcommittee program will continue.
I think those are included in these other items, though.
Well, maybe we should just table this discussion until after we get the presentations from everybody else about what there's going on with their commissions.
Well, I think making the subcommittee for the bylaws is kind of separate. I think we can do that pretty easy. And then it'll fall into in discussions with city staff.
Yeah.
The question I have about that would be, since we don't have bylaws, how many members would we want on the commission? I mean, the committee, because usually it's limited to, is it like 2 or 3 commissioners?
Right.
3 is the maximum.
3. So I would use that as a guide, not to, just from past committees that we've done.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it could be done with 2, but it can't have more than 3.
Yeah. I mean, what we can do is if we want to listen to the full presentation, because this is the first meeting of the Public Amenities Commission, we're going to have a lot of presentations from all 4 of the commissions that we, you know, absorbed to create this commission. We might want to just continue this item in its entirety to the subsequent meeting. You know, my hope was to try to see if we can throw some ideas of adopting or creating subcommittees, but I think it might be kind of premature with no construction of bylaws at this point. So perhaps maybe we make a motion to continue this item if everyone's okay with it.
So what are you saying, so that we can't discuss the subcommittees that we previously had in some of these other commissions and vote on keeping them or not keeping them?
So I think the order of this, J2 basically has a discussion on bylaws and subcommittee appointments. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to have presentations from the former Historical Commission, former Parks and Rec, former Library Commission. And I think once we have the presentations for the rest of the items in item J, the rest of the commissioners that weren't on one commissioner or the other will have kind of a broader picture of what we want to adopt as subcommittees moving forward. So I think to answer item J2, we might want to continue it, because if we make subcommittee appointments and then hear presentations, we might be swayed one way or another.
Right. Who did you put together this agenda?
I did.
So when you're talking about subcommittee appointments in J2, and then you're also talking about active subcommittees in like J4 and all these other ones, like how did you understand the difference? And were you thinking the subcommittees that you're talking about in J2 are the ones that were already pre-existing on these other?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be it,
I
exactly.
would move to trail item J2 until after item J6. We'll hear the presentations. At that point, we can discuss what we want to do. I think it'll give us an opportunity to introduce ourselves to the group as well. And you can see where we're all coming from. That's my motion.
We made a motion to approve the order of the agenda. Do we undo that?
Yeah, how does that work?
Is it
We're just trailing. We're actually hit this item. Now we're just putting it in a different
to come
spot.
back later is fine?
Yeah.
Do we want to make a substitute motion for J2 to continue the component of bylaws and proceed to the component for subcommittees following item J6?
If that's what you want, I don't have a problem with that. I think that would be acceptable.
And Mr. Chairman, the one thing I would ask is that staff or legal, if you look through all of the bylaws, they're all very specific. And I don't even know, and we could talk about it for some time, but it specifies the day that we meet, the time that we meet. The times are different for each of the different previous commissions. The days are obviously different. I think the construct of the commissions are different. I know the preservation was very specific as to who could serve on those. So it is going to require, I think, some work. And I know our city staff is extremely busy, and this is perhaps not something that you had planned as far as the coordination of this, but it probably will require some legal assistance as far as the bylaws. And I don't know, it would take us some time if you look through all the individual bylaws to do that. The one thing I was going to ask, though, and I don't know if this is, we all probably served on different days and different times again, so I didn't know if Monday at 6:30 was the best day or
Well, thank you
not.
for bringing that up, absolutely. So the first Monday of the month was available, and then just for clarity, the first, second, and third Wednesday of the month. And also, the earliest is 6:30 right now. You could move it back to 7. So it would be something that you could discuss now and make a motion. And then later on, when we adjourn, we would adjourn to that subsequent time and date that the commission agreed on.
Is that something we can vote on now? Day and time?
My understanding is yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just, my preference would be a Wednesday. You just mentioned there were potentially 3 Wednesdays of the month. I would be open to any of those, but my preference would be Wednesday over the Monday.
Well, I think the Parks and Rec Commission, you guys met on a Wednesday, correct?
I believe the second Wednesday of
Wednesday. So
each
that was
month.
4 members of this commission were already meeting on a second Wednesday. The 2 of us were meeting on, and just Commissioner Maraca, you were on a Monday, correct?
I was on the Monday with Mr. Vinke as our coordinator, but previously it was a Wednesday.
How do you feel about Wednesday?
I'm fine with Wednesday, as long as we pick one.
Yeah.
I think we were the 3rd Wednesday, the second was Parks and Rec, so.
Is everybody okay with 6:30 or do we prefer 7?
I think I noticed in the bylaws, I thought the earliest was 6 and the latest was 7, so perhaps 6:30 is right there in that soft spot.
I would think we'd want to find out what our workload's going to be, because I'd rather be able to get out of here by a time certain than start at a time certain. And I'm sure that you've got a long day as anyway. We always started at 7, but 6:30 can be doable too. But I don't think we should fix it until we get the bylaws all put together anyway.
Yeah.
Well, you will need
Just
that
leave this
in the
open then?
bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we could do like our next meeting is at that time, and then if we had to with the bylaws, enshrine it.
So we can make a motion then to adopt a time and date and then continue the remainder of the items for the continuation of the bylaws discussion. But we need to make a motion for it, so.
Right now, it says in your agenda that the next meeting is going to be at 6:30 on November 4th.
That's a Monday, I think.
I think that might just be because of the way that.
It is, but we
agenda
have
came out.
a national election, and I know that we had one of our meetings canceled because of that, so maybe it makes sense to find out from the city clerk if she's going to need this facility to do whatever they do with the count ballots and stuff, but we can pick it during the adjournment part as well.
Okay. Do we want to make a motion then, or do we want to continue this item for after J6?
I already made the motion, so you want a second?
Can you repeat the motion on the floor?
Yes, so we move item J2 after we hear the presentations after J6.
I'll second.
Can we get a vote? All
We
right.
do need public comment at some point.
Okay, hold on one second. We have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Can we vote on it first? All in favor?
We have to have public comment first.
Okay. Do we have any?
Oh, it is.
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
So this, just to clarify, this has nothing to do with the date and time, because we talked about this first, and then we jumped to date and time. Does this have something to do with that?
It
or-
does because it's a component of the bylaws, but we're going to continue this item until after J6. That's the motion on the floor.
Okay, so we're going to talk about date and time again after J6. That's what you're saying?
Yes, because
Okay.
nobody made a motion to adopt it at this item right now. We have one motion on the floor we have to vote for, which is just to continue this item tentatively.
And so the idea is that if we continue it to after J6, we're going to have more information to make a more informed decision about what time we're starting and on what day?
The reason is because there's a component of subcommittees within J2 as well. And if we have the presentations prior to that, we'll have a more informed decision regarding subcommittees. J2 is a lot of stuff within J2. So part of it, we've just been discussing about possibly, continuing the conversation about bylaws, but it seems like, the commission wants to at least move forward with discussing subcommittee appointments and then a component of the bylaws. So, but we have to vote on the motion that's on the floor right now.
Mhm.
Okay, so all in favor, do you want to repeat the motion one more time?
Sure. That we consider item J2, or at least table the item J2 until after we have item J6. That's in the simplest form.
And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's move on to item J3, receive and file an overview of preservation.
If you could please share my screen. There we go. Good evening. My name is Stacy Kinsella. I'm the senior planner with the City of Redondo Beach. I've been managing the preservation program for the city for 9 years. Preservation in the City of Redondo Beach began with a windshield survey back in 1986. The city hired preservation consultants to tour South Redondo and identify properties that may be potentially historic. A preservation ordinance was adopted in 1989, and that was the creation of Title 10, Chapter 4. A historic context statement was prepared in 1995, and this gives an overview of the history of the city. It highlights the major milestones of development and significant time periods within the city. A windshield survey was done again by preservation consultants in 1996, and this time it was the northern portion of the city. In the 2000s, primary records were created for each of the sites that were identified within the Historic Resources Survey. The City Council did allocate $175,000 towards a new citywide survey that is meant to include both residential and commercial projects throughout the city. It's also meant to be more than just a windshield survey, which is quite literally a drive-by, right? We're asking that preservation consultants actually walk the streets and identify each of the properties and assess them appropriately. The draft for the request for proposal has been created, and we're hoping to launch that in early 2025. This is a quick look of the Historic Resources Survey. It became a watch list of potentially historic properties. At the time, the preservation consultants utilized a rating system of A, B, C, and D, with A and B rated properties having the most distinctive features of that style of architecture, and C's and D's being less remarkable, but still having potential historic status. Also, you can see that there's a National Register list. Some of those properties might also be eligible for national listing. When they did the windshield survey, they were really looking for the age of the property, at least 50 years of age, and also the architectural style. Now, the survey is only a guide because there's no information about the research on who lived there, who built it, did anything important happen to that property. So more research is always needed. Although after designation, we've done all that research, the ratings of A, B, C, and D no longer apply. So within the historic context statement, it goes through some basic elements of our history. We were basically rancheros in the early to mid 1800s. Of course, we had statehood in 1850. The Pacific Railroad came here around 1887, and our first wharf was built in 1889. We eventually had 3 wharves and had quite the shipping industry coming down from Oregon. The city, of course, was incorporated in April 1892, and we had quite a few American investors really focus on development near the coastline. Investors like Henry Huntington were trying to support a shipping industry as well as making Redondo Beach a destination. Most of the oldest buildings are in the southern portion of the city because that is the original portion of Redondo Beach. The most prominent style of historic architecture is craftsman. So you see clusters of beach cottages, we have some bungalow courts, and then some boarding houses, all within walking distance of the wharves and the original downtown. So shipping and industrial activities fell out of favor with the residents because that was quite a lot of pollution along the coastline. We also had storms wreak havoc along the coastline. We're unprotected here, right? Hotel Redondo closed in 1925 and the historic library was built in 1930. Of course, we had the Great Depression. There was the infamous gambling barge called the Rex. It was about 3 miles out from the coastline. And then downtown became less and less desirable to the residents. This became the shift towards resort and water activities. The surf culture, George Freeth coming here to do demonstrations here, and get people excited about visiting and making this a true destination for people vacationing. Much later in the 1960s, of course, there's the creation of Keene Harbor, Riviera Village, Wilderness Park, and that whole downtown area became the Village Apartments. Our city hall was originally on Emerald Street, just a couple blocks from the ocean, and it moved here where we're sitting today. Here's one of the original Sanborn maps. I always like to go back to these. These date back to about 1916. You can see on the right-hand side, City Park. This eventually becomes Veterans Park. This is your original commercial district down here. Here's our little city hall that used to be here on Emerald. So all of this down here became the Village Apartments. And I want to point out that South Pacific Avenue used to cut all the way across, but now we've got the boardwalk and all of the different retailers along here. And you can see the location of the pier, same location as now, and here's the Mondstadt shipping pier. It's just fun to look at. I also want to point out within the historic context statement, it talks about some folklore of gemstones being found along the coastline, sort of like sunken treasure at some point. Not sure I believe that. However, that's how we got the gem streets. So we have beryl, which is short for beryllium, carnelian, diamond, emerald, garnet. You can see they're all in alphabetical order. Before beryl, there's agate over here, and we also have amethyst that's hiding further up on beryl. And then further down, you've got ruby, sapphire, topaz. So you've got all the gem streets. Here are just some great photos of Hotel Redondo. Same company that built Hotel Redondo also built the Hotel del Coronado. Same feel, same look, right? Here are the Ainsworth Court staircase steps, still there today. Half of it is under plantings, but they're still there, they're still usable. So the northern portion of Redondo Beach was primarily agricultural land. They had put in a bid to be a part of Redondo Beach, and it failed the first time around, but it was finally annexed in 1927. They had a lot of resources that they really needed city support on. But they did have specialty crops like the spineless cactus. The farmers had formed a cooperative to help serve this area, and they tried to entice wealthy investors to invest in this new northern portion by naming the streets with high-end names such as Vanderbilt. The defense industry really changed the development pattern up there as well. You had TRW, Space Park, eventually Northrop Grumman, right? So all of their families moved here. And that's how you have these little R1 neighborhoods up there. That created a commercial boom along Aviation and Artesia Boulevards. And then eventually, our municipal code was updated to no longer permit farming activities within that area of the city. In general, not as many cultural resources because it was mostly farmland. But it's important to note that for modern day planning, you have these different development patterns of South Redondo being the original portion of the city. You have all these beautiful R1 properties, right, near the coastline. In the northern portion, you have more of the multifamily properties. You have some pockets of R1, but it's mostly R2, R3, and then you've got some R1As, which are the tall and skinnies. So very different development patterns based upon where they started. So one of the applications you'll see is called the landmark designation application. I included the specific criteria in the report, but in general, the property will be deemed significant due to either a person, event, or the style of architecture for that property. It doesn't have to be a building. Usually it is. Doesn't have to be a building. The Morton Bay fig tree next to the historic library is designated. It's one of the last remaining elements of the Hotel Redondo landscaping. Also, Vincent Park is designated. It's one of the last remaining elements of the early Chautauqua learning movement, which eventually became the Redondo Union High School site. So when somebody comes to me and says, I want to designate my property, I do a ton of research through city planning records, the building records, the library records, and I see if I can find some sort of level of significance based upon the criteria in the preservation ordinance. If I do, then we move forward with the application and bring it to you. The biggest incentive is the Mills Act agreement. That's the contract where you can have up to a 50% reduction in your property taxes. And that's basically meant to loosen up your funds to help maintain the property. But ultimately, you are saying that you're going to continue to maintain this property in perpetuity as a designated resource. Designation itself is voluntary. However, it's not involuntary if the site has a level of significance, right? That is to say that a site could meet the significance criteria. They could decide not to designate it. However, it could still meet that criteria and could still potentially be a part of the program. Multiple significant properties, of course, in a contiguous geographic area can become a historic district. We have the Gertruda Avenue Historic District. We have our most recent historic district on North Catalina Avenue. And then we also have a couple of mini districts around the city. Here's the first landmark. These are the Diamond Street apartments. This one's Classic Revival. This is the Sweetser House itself, as well as the guest house in the back. That's landmark number 2 and number 3. It's American Colonial Revival. Here's a lovely row of Craftsman homes on South Catalina Avenue. This is not a district. They didn't want to form a district, but we slowly designated all of the structures. So it's essentially a lovely grouping without having created a formal district. Here's one, a farmhouse up in the northern portion of the city. This is the Bisson House. This was a farmhouse on a 17-acre farm, and the Bisson family owned a lumber company. So another application you'll see is the Certificate of Appropriateness application. This is required to request exterior alterations for either a designated landmark or an eligible site. Minor alterations such as windows and doors, some repairs, those go to the minor alterations subcommittee. Traditionally, we've had 2 commissioners on that committee. Major alterations and additions, they go to the commission for a public hearing review. The alterations need to be compatible to the original structure. They need to be subordinate to the original structure, but slightly differentiated so you know which part is the original resource and what's the new addition. We want to avoid, creating false historicism. Sometimes it comes up where you have this really cute Spanish home and somebody wants to do this gorgeous Spanish tile on the exterior. Well, it's not original. You can do it on the inside, but we don't want to over-decorate the exterior. We want to keep it as original as possible. Now, within the preservation ordinance, it states the prescriptive standards. That is referring to the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. Those were created by the National Park Service. I included those 10 key standards in your report, as well as the link to their website. Anytime there's a certificate of appropriateness application that comes to you, I usually break down those 10 key standards and point out which ones apply to the project and how the project meets those standards. This is a neat house. This is 124 South Guadalupe Avenue. This is the Bulger House. This was considered an A-rated colonial revival structure. The family wanted to sell the home to a developer, and the developer wanted to demolish it because it's a huge lot behind it. Through a variety of positive collaborative meetings, we were able to save that structure, but also go through the public hearing process to approve new condos behind it. So that you see that new driveway on the right-hand side, there are 3 condos hiding back there. So the whole of the property was still utilized, but we could save the resource. The City of Redondo Beach is a certified local government. So that's a program that was established as part of the National Historic Preservation Act. They did some amendments in the 1980s and included CLG as part of that. It means that Redondo Beach has adopted an ordinance, created an inventory, established a commission. We allow for ongoing public participation, and we enforce the state and local laws in relationship to historic preservation. We have to have at least 4 public hearings a year. 2 commissioners have to have qualified technical background in historic preservation. And then there's supposed to be some sort of annual training for the commission and the staff that manage historic preservation projects. All of these preservation activities get reported annually to the State Office of Historic Preservation. OHP was also consulted when this commission was being formed to make sure that we would meet all of our CLG requirements in this new version of a consolidated commission. And then being a CLG means that we also have access to technical state assistance, possible grant funding, and other educational programs. So for preservation, as a preservation planner, every application that comes to me has 2 layers of review. It's what's in our municipal code for the development standards of that zone, and also what's in the preservation ordinance and the Secretary of Interior standards. So every time there's a breakdown for both criteria in that application and in that report. Most of these properties, because they're so old, they're legal non-conforming. They have substandard stepbacks, they have enclosed porches, they have tiny garages or no garages, right? So there are a variety of things that we have to work around. Most of the properties you'll see will have some fun anomalies, and we try to go through the building records and figure out what happened. For projects that are a little bit larger, like the formation of a historic district, we might have a preservation consultant come in and participate and prepare a formal historic resource evaluation. My evaluations on properties is usually a couple pages long. It's whatever we can get our hands on here at the city. A preservation consultant usually does research well beyond what we have, and they'll create an evaluation that's about 40 pages long. They'll also sometimes create a preservation plan, a detailed report of how each structure is to be preserved and restored. All of the character defining features on the exterior of the building, how they're to be retained. Also, a lot of people throw around the term historic, right? Not every old building is significant. It has to meet that significance criteria in the preservation ordinance. Not all interesting buildings are historic, right? I walk a lot of interesting sites. I see a lot of cool things, but do they meet the criteria, right? I usually only bring applications to you that I think are fairly solid, and I can give you that analysis in the report. Also, it's important to know that a significant structure or site is not necessarily the most attractive one. We designated a lodge building that's basically a plain Art Deco structure, but because of the community groups that met there and formed, a lot of the early churches met there before they had church sites, right? Because of the use of the site, it's significant. So sometimes they're not as attractive as, say, a perfect craftsman home, right? Most of my historic owners have really undertaken a labor of love. It's a lot of ongoing maintenance, long-term maintenance on these properties, and most of them take it very seriously and love the work that they do for these properties. And then lastly, for preservation, it's not meant to obstruct development, but it does guide the alterations. Like the one at 124 South Guadalupe, you can still preserve the home up front, do development in the back, and you get the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Ask some questions?
Yes.
At the last agenda, you had two properties that were up for consideration. Are they coming back to this commission to be considered?
The district, yes, will come back to you for consideration. There was a small addition on North Francisca. I actually brought it to the minor alteration subcommittee because we were not able to have a quorum. Because of its small, the project was small enough that they felt comfortable making a determination that it was approvable. But the district with, on North Catalina with 5 different buildings will definitely come back to this group.
So do we need it on our next agenda?
Yes, we do.
So do you recommend we discuss having it added to our agenda now or wait until referrals?
I'll probably coordinate with our library director to make sure that it's one of the first items you see next month.
Okay. My second question is in North Redondo, there's a massive amount of tear downs of buildings, the old stuff from the 50s and the 40s. Does the city keep an inventory? Because it may not be unique now, but in 10 years when all the 2-and-a lots and tall and skinnies go in place, it'll have more historical significance. Are you guys keeping track of that?
So that'll be part of the effort for the new citywide survey, right? Most of those were not of age when preservation consultants surveyed the city. However, there is discussion within the preservation community to possibly preserve 1950s tract housing. So that will be part of that review process.
Okay, and then you saw the picture of 2604 Fisk Lane, which is an old farmhouse. It's worth walking by there, but if you don't want to walk all the way there, if you go to the Historical Museum in the back room, there's a whole big display with regards to that, and it's worth finding out the story behind the family that owned it. The person who has it now actually does an outstanding job of keeping it up, and it's in a nice, quiet neighborhood. My last question, on the certified local government program where we're putting our information down as part of that report, is there a deadline? Because I know sometimes you attach resumes or applications. Is there a deadline for us to revise what we think you should be putting into the report for us?
I usually reach out to the group sometime in March. We tend to, so the state has moved the deadlines around a little bit. Sometimes it's March or April. This last year, they moved it all the way to June. If there's something that I don't have, I'll reach out to the individual commissioners because I have to put that together. Some of this information is already included in your commissioner application. Some people naturally included resumes. So I pull them from there. Basically, the city clerk's records can provide some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Can we make a motion to receive and file an overview of preservation?
1 second, I had a question.
Sure.
There was a property, there were 2 meetings that we couldn't have because we didn't have a quorum. Is that coming back?
That's the district on North Catalina Avenue.
Oh, is that the one that he was talking
Yes.
about? Okay.
That will come back. Yes, it's ready.
Do you want a motion to receive and file? Is that what you're looking for?
So also the way that, and Dana, maybe you can chime in on this as well. The way that this agenda is written is that these items are to receive and file. Are we able to have discussion following the presentation if it's written as receive and file?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, then do we have a motion to receive and file item J3?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You want public comment too, in case we have any?
There are no comments or attendees for this item.
All right, moving on to item J4, receive and file overview of the former Recreation and Parks Commission, including active subcommittees.
Okay, I do have a presentation, so I don't know if we can get it from this screen. If not, I can move back. But my name is Kelly Orta. I am the Deputy Community Services Director, and happy to be here tonight to give you all a general overview of the, perfect, thank you, the Parks and Recreation, or excuse me, Recreation and Parks, excuse me, I always say it backwards. And what I wanted to do is give you an overview of kind of how it fit in with the Community Services Department, general overview of the department as a whole, and then some of the past work that the commission has taken on over the past year or so, as well as some of the active subcommittees that are currently going on, potentially for future discussion on whether those should continue. So the Community Services Department served as the liaison to the Recreation and Parks Commission. Our department does include 4 different divisions, which includes cultural arts, housing, transit, and recreation. Specific for the Recreation and Parks Commission, the Recreation Division was all that was included in the purview of the commission itself. So anything from cultural arts, housing, and transit typically were not on the Recreation and Parks agendas, didn't fall into that area of focus. But just wanted you to know that our department does include a lot of other divisions and teams. In total, our department has over 200 employees, and that includes part-time and full-time. The majority of those employees do come out of the Recreation Department. We do have a lot of seasonal part-time employees. That takes up a majority of that number, depending on where we are throughout the year. But we certainly have a number of folks from our cultural arts team up at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, as well as at the Historical Museum. Our housing team oversees Section 8 housing vouchers, as well as other voucher programs that we provide. And then our transit team obviously oversees the Beach Cities Transit Program, which has the transportation throughout all of the beach cities. Moving on, I wanted to just provide, just generally speaking, so that everyone has an idea of some of the discussion topics that the commission has taken on. I think having a brand new commission and having commissioners who maybe weren't too familiar with some of the topics, just a general idea of some of the focus areas, I think is a really good place to start. And so throughout 2024, some of the previous discussion topics has been the city's sailing program. Specifically, that was an update on where we were and progress that had been made on enhancing that program with an outside vendor to assist with enhancements to the programs and activities, as well as the sailing club activities. The second item is the 4th of July fireworks show. The commission just provided general input on the show and guidelines to inform the council before they decided whether it would like the city to do a show in 2024. The park ranger program was another item. We did have a subcommittee for that, which I'll go into in just a moment. The commission felt that it would be worthwhile for a subcommittee to look into whether park ranger program was something the city should look into. Ultimately, that subcommittee, the work kind of stopped when the news came out that the commission would be consolidated. And so again, that will be most likely for a future discussion, if not this evening, a determination of whether that work should continue. And again, I'll go into that in just a moment. Pickleball certainly has been a big topic throughout the city. The Parks and Rec Commission has certainly had a number of discussions on that topic as well. There's been a lot of progress made in the past 3 months or so with the city council with pickleball courts, as well as the actual installation of additional courts. And so there's been multiple discussions at the commission level on the pickleball throughout the city. Volunteer acknowledgement, again, there's another active subcommittee that was specifically dedicated to acknowledge volunteers throughout the city, specifically for work that had been done in the city's parks or green spaces. And so the subcommittee would review applications, can determine whether or not it was appropriate to take to the commission for consideration. If the commission felt it was the volunteers were worthy of that acknowledgement, we would then take another item at a future meeting to formally acknowledge that individual or group. And so again, another subcommittee for your consideration. The Dominguez Park Dog Park, there was some community concerns about the general upkeep of the dog park as well as just some maintenance items at that location. And so the commission heard an update on that directly from our Public Works team as well as our staff on the day-to-day of the facility as well as any future improvements that were planned. And then lastly, probably the last big topic was the after-school program. Another probably big topic maybe within the past 2 years throughout the city, but specifically with the Recreation and Parks Commission, specifically geared towards finding some qualified staff to to expand the program and accommodate the large wait list of students that we had at all 8 of our locations throughout the city. So again, that's just a quick snapshot. This is certainly not to be all-encompassing of all discussion items. There's certainly a lot of smaller ones that were discussed on agendas, but this is just a very high-level look at some of the discussions that the commission has had throughout 2024. So moving on to the active subcommittees, the commission does have had 4 active subcommittees. I'm going to go through each one and just provide a little bit of background information on each. And then at some point, again, I don't know if the commission would choose tonight to determine whether or not to continue these or at a future meeting to make that determination. I'll leave that up to you. But the first subcommittee is the Facility User Subcommittee. This was developed to create a better communication between the city and nonprofit user groups, specifically the ones that use the parks and outdoor spaces is kind of how it initially was generated. But it's definitely expanded a bit into others that use facilities and just general open spaces throughout the city. So think the AYSO groups, the Little League groups, all of those groups. And so this has been a really valuable communication tool between staff and all of these individual groups. A lot of information and knowledge has been gained. They have, not formally, but it tends to meet quarterly, and that seems to be a really good kind of balance to keep the communication rolling, as well as because a lot of the groups do coordinate themselves on a seasonal basis. So if this subcommittee does not formally continue with the commission, I, as staff, would like to coordinate that internally, administratively. I do think it's a very valuable tool and certainly appreciate all of the efforts that the previous subcommittee had put forward to get that together. So just wanted to mention that there. The second one is the Park Ranger Subcommittee. Again, this was developed to research and analyze whether the commission would want to recommend to the city council, specifically during future budget discussions, whether the city should fund the establishment of a park ranger program. This is a big topic. There's so many different ways to look at a park ranger program. There's so many different definitions of a park ranger program. And so the subcommittee was tasked with meeting with all of the stakeholders, meeting with all city staff in a number of departments, from police department to our community services staff at each of kind of the major park locations, as well as our public works team, who are really boots on the ground and see kind of what goes on at the parks and what issues and concerns may need to be addressed. And so several meetings have taken place with some of our key staff members. Again, the work there has stopped. It's up to you all, again, if you would like that to continue. I don't know if any of the previous subcommittee members have their own opinion on whether or not that should continue. We didn't quite make it too far into the kind of analysis of it to really have for staff to have a strong opinion, but I will leave it to any of the existing subcommittee members if they would like to add that when the future discussion is had. The third one is the Volunteer Acknowledgement Program Subcommittee. And I won't get too much into this because I think I described it in enough detail already. But it really was an opportunity for the commission to acknowledge some pretty hardworking volunteers throughout the city. I believe we've given out 3 or 4 certificates already. And it's just a really great opportunity. The city especially through the facility user subcommittee, it became apparent the number of organizations and individuals that do so much for the city's parks and green spaces and recreational programs. So it was really a nice opportunity to kind of shine the light on all the work that they do. So we do currently have 2 pending applications for review by the commission. And so both of those applications have been reviewed by the subcommittee and deemed worthy of having that consideration. So it's again up to the commission if they would like us to continue that program. If we would, then we would agendize those two applications for a future meeting. And the last one is the pickleball subcommittee. This was developed, I would say maybe a year ago around that time, specifically to analyze the implementation of pickleball courts throughout the city. This subcommittee was developed at a time where the city hadn't taken formal action on 2 key locations, Alta Vista and Aviation Park. The city council has, I would say in the past 2 to 3 months, given very clear direction on what they would like to do for pickleball at both locations. And so the pickleball subcommittee, the work that they were doing, they felt that they were working towards making some sort of action in that direction. Once council did that, they then just kind of became a liaison between staff and anyone in the pickleball community that had questions or concerns. It's really, again, up to the commission. I don't necessarily know if that that subcommittee needs to continue just because we do have the clear direction from council. But of course, any liaison between staff and the community, especially on a topic as important as pickleball, may certainly be a good idea. So those are the 4 active subcommittees. And so then tonight, we're just asking for the commission to consider whether to continue the efforts of these subcommittees. And if you do so choose to, we would need to elect the commissioners to serve on each one of them. So I'm open and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are you going to stay the liaison part on the Parks and Rec stuff?
Yes.
Okay. I know that it hasn't been advertised much, but it's in your materials. There's a Halloween party on the 26th from 3 to 6 p.m. That's still going forward at Perry Park?
Yes, the hot pumpkins in the park event. Is that what you're referring? Yes.
And then I know the Historical Society has something also going on at Dominguez Park, October 26th from 11 to 3. Veterans Park, if you walk in there, you see that some of the plaques have been ripped out on a lot of them. Is there a plan on replenishing those plaques?
Not at this time. We don't have specific funding for it, but it is something that we're gathering information on replacement materials so that we can determine what the cost would be to replace, and then we would move forward with the future budget request.
Is there a time period that you're looking at to do this?
Not that I'm aware of. The Public Works Department would be taking the lead on that, so I'm not familiar with where that's fitting in with their list.
Steve Villarano, I just gave you a heads up that I was going to bring it up because he was asking about this meeting tonight, and he's apparently willing to put up a plaque down at Riviera Village Park over there. Are you guys working with them, or?
Yes, we've been in regular communication with Mr. Villarino, and there will be a future item on this commission's agenda considering his request specific for the Riviera Parkette. So more information will be before you related to that.
And then, I don't know if you all know that we do have a city arborist, and we have some really amazing trees in the community, and it would be nice somehow to coordinate some sort of program, maybe even with the adult education from the library, to get the arborist to meet with people and walk around and check out all the different trees. So that's just throwing that out there as a possible interactive community subcommittee.
Would that be under Recreation and Parks? Wouldn't that be, the arborist falls under the Public Works?
Yeah, but we can have programming with the arborist, for example, to, the tree over in Veterans Park, that's the big tree that's been around forever. It's, stories are around it and people get introduced to it. When we put a Path of History sign over in Veterans Park, there's some really amazing trees. And you walk through all the neighborhoods and you see the trees are what makes it outstanding. So it would be nice to incorporate into the Parks and Recs, the arborist. He's already on city staff and he seems to be very knowledgeable about all those different trees.
I have a question. Both on the ordinance and in the bylaws for the Parks and Rec Commission, it mentioned something about entertainment, but I didn't notice that you mentioned anything here. So is that, was that previously under the Parks and Rec Commission purview? And does it now become part of the new Cultural Arts Commission purview?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure where that's going to land. I don't know if entertainment could be considered recreational in nature, and so maybe that's why that word was thrown in there, events and activities. But so that's kind of a subjective word in there. But I'm not too familiar with the Cultural Arts Commission and what that is going to look like specifically, but it's something that we can, as we kind of work through our bylaws, we can consider whether that is a good definition of the work you all would like to do.
They had a second reading of it on Tuesday night at the council meeting, and it passed. And it incorporated music and theater and film and all of these types of things, which are part of, cultural arts, broader umbrella of cultural arts. So I guess that's something that we would need some clarification. And, would that be something that kind of crosses over both commissions, or, who would, under which commission would that purview still?
You're in luck. The next speaker happens to be the Cultural Arts Manager, that's a liaison, so.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's certainly a lot of crossover, as you can see, even with Public Works, with the trees. There's always going to be some gray area when it becomes, those three topic areas, but certainly something to look into for sure.
And then I had a question regarding the pickleball subcommittee. Because this is an item that, people are still asking about it. There are very many questions out there.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, what is happening at the staff level in terms of communication with the public as to what's happening at Alta Vista, at Aviation Park, and so forth?
Well, we haven't done any dedicated outreach, but we have made some progress. I'm happy to provide just very brief overview tonight if you'd like me to. So specific for aviation, I'll start there. That's going to be a much bigger project. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the City Council, designated funding for us to do design of a pickleball facility at Aviation Park in the open field area behind the gymnasium. That's going to be a very big project that our Public Works team is going to really have to take the lead on. And so to my knowledge, no work has been done on that just yet. I have to see where it kind of falls in on their list. Alta Vista, the City Council directed staff to transition one existing tennis court into 4 pickleball courts. And that will be tennis court 7, the one closest to the playground area. In order for us to actually do that work and make that transition, we do have to do I'm going to say the term incorrectly. Maybe Stacy can jump in if she's familiar, but the CEQA, is it notice of conformance? I don't think that's correct.
Let me see if I can get.
There's a certain determination we have to make on it. Do you recall?
Is it the notice, do you mean the notice of preparation, or do you mean?
I don't remember if it's that one.
Or the exemption?
Exemption, excuse me. It's the CEQA exemption, yes.
Declaration?
Yes, and so that's something obviously we're working with our community development team on, because they typically take the lead on that. In order for us to do that, we have to get a formal sound study done on it. And so we have received proposals from 3 sound consultants to come out and do a formal sound study on the court. So once we get that completed, we'll be able to do the CEQA exemption. From there, then we can actually do the work at the park. So there, unfortunately, just a little bit of steps in between there. It's not as simple as having the contractor come out and resurface. So we're making progress, but as far as communicating that out, we don't have any direct communication tools currently for that project.
Because that's a little surprising. The sound study, that wasn't something that, was ever mentioned. I mean, I know that they conducted, the police department sound study as part of, what the council voted on, but was there money allocated for the sound study, or is this something, I just don't understand the process of that.
Sure, yeah, and the timeline of it is a little bit, we weren't aware that the sound study had to in fact take place until we looked into the CEQA exemption. In order to apply for the CEQA exemption, which we were aware needed to happen, it was after that, after the council gave us authority to move forward, when we realized that the sound study was required to in fact do the CEQA exemption. So I would have to go back and check with the team that's working on the sound study proposal to see where it is in the process, and whether or not specific funding is dedicated to it, but I don't think it's a very high cost item, so I don't think the funding will be an issue.
And forgive me for my ignorance, what is the CEQA exemption?
So it's the California Environmental Quality Act, right? I always reference my cultural resources. It's a resource area that's studied. If you remove a landmark site, it could be considered an environmental impact. We're going through that review process to make sure that a project does not have an environmental impact through all of the actions that we intend to take for the full scope. So we try to find it exempt if we have costs to do so, right? If there are studies done, obviously I've worked on major development projects where we had multiple resource areas that had impacts, and then we have to do an environmental impact report. This is much more focused on the resource areas that could be affected.
Got it. There's no date yet for that?
Not at this time, no. But we are working towards getting that proposal finalized with the sound consultant.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Can I follow up on her question? So is there going to be an issue, say, for example, one of the members of this group wants to be working with another commission's person as well and have a joint group? Is that going to be a problem?
I mean, I don't know if I can answer that yes or no. I think it's really up to this commission, and then making sure that whatever the focus area of that discussion group makes sense. I'm not too exactly sure what you're suggesting as far as what that topic would be, but if the topic falls within the purview of two commissions, you could certainly create a collaborative subcommittee. That's definitely possible.
Before we make a motion, do we have anybody online for e-comment?
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
Okay. Could someone make a motion to receive and file overview of the former Recreation and Parks Commission, including active subcommittees?
Motion to receive and file.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving on to item J5, receive and file an overview of the former Historical Commission, including active committees.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Margolis, the Cultural Arts Manager in the Community Services Department. So this is going to be an overview of the Historical Commission. So the official powers and duties as set forth in the ordinance, which was enacted in 1967, were 1, to investigate, maintain, and catalog all historical information, documents, records, and pictures that would be of general interest to the city and its citizens. 2, to compile records and recordings. 3, to promote the keeping of a written historical record of the city in narrative form. 4, to be an advisory body. And 5, to perform volunteer services at the Redondo Beach Historical Museum. So maybe at this point, one of the things that I could mention is this commission is probably different than the other 3 commissions that have been merged in my mind, in the sense that the vast majority of its work is done outside of commission meetings, which, I'll get to the other, kind of work that they do. But I think that is a major difference with the other commissions. So a little bit about the history. So, there wasn't always a museum, but there was collecting that was going on before there was a museum. So before a building existed to house an historical collection, that was the period from 1967 when the ordinance was established through 1983, commissioners were actively engaged in collecting newspapers, yearbooks, photographs, postcards, books, brochures, signs, artifacts, things from businesses that went out of business and boats that sank, et cetera, and storing them in their homes, their businesses, and various city offices. And then commissioners who were very knowledgeable regarding Redondo Beach history frequently gave slide presentations on the subject for the city's birthday and other events. When we got a building, so in 1983, the first museum was in the former Patterson Elementary School library, which was at Nob Hill Avenue and Pacific Coast Highway. That complex of buildings was demolished in 2017. And then in 1989, the city acquired the Queen Anne Cottage and moved it to Dominguez Park from where it was at 318 South Broadway. And then in 1993, City Council decided to turn the cottage into a museum, added a room to the rear of the building. In 2008, there were some repairs that needed to be done to shore up the building's rear addition, which had slowly been sinking. The problem stemmed from the fact that the area at Flagler Lane and 190th Street was built atop a former landfill. And while the front part of the museum sits on solid ground, the back room was built on infill material that apparently wasn't stable enough. So a gaping crack ran from the cottage's rooftop down its eaves and siding. Now, there was extensive repairs that were done at the time, but we're noticing that there's still possibly repercussions of that same, I guess we'll call it a geological event, and that will probably need some attention in the future. So on April 25th, 2009, there was a grand reopening of the museum, and this was the plaque that's installed near the front door. So what was the commission's work then since 2009? Well, the collection outgrew the ability of the building to safely display and store everything. A large portion of the collection was moved to the Performing Arts Center, and with no more room to exhibit and store new acquisitions, commissioners transitioned their volunteer work from collection management to advocacy and event planning. So what does that mean? From collecting to visitor development. Special events, the idea of implementing special events was if you could draw people to the museum, that's for reasons other than just looking at old things, that's going to expose more people to the museum and hopefully get them excited about the collections and what's available for them in terms of historical knowledge. So there have been many different events that the commission has planned and implemented over the years, but the three that seem to be the ones that have continued over a period of years are the annual birthday celebration, which occurs around April 29th, a Halloween event. This year it's going to be Saturday, October 26th, before the one at Perry Park, and then the December holiday event. And these events are usually done in conjunction with the Morel House, which, as you probably know, is operated by a nonprofit organization called the Redondo Beach Historical Society. So we try to, plan times when both historic buildings will be open to maximize people's enjoyment of Heritage Court, which is what that whole area is called, that part of Dominguez Park. This was the flyer for last year's birthday celebration. And this is the flyer for this year's Halloween celebration. And this was last year's holiday celebration. So what are the things, and these were the things that we need the commission to do currently. I think the number one role of the commission is to be an advocate. History and cultural arts in general tend to fall to the bottom of the funding priorities in every community. I mean, it's not just in Redondo Beach that this happens, it happens everywhere. And if there's not a group of people who are actively engaged in advocacy, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more, it can completely fall off the radar, council's radar. advocacy, the best way that you can engage in advocacy is to attend council meetings and to speak to the needs or to thank council when they do fund things, and then to show up at those council district meetings. So this is, and I have a slide at the end where I'll point this out more, but that's what I mean about it's much more important for, in my mind, for historical commission members to do that kind of work at city council, at district meetings, than the work that happens at the actual commission meetings. So because of the commission's advocacy, we were able to achieve a lot in fiscal year 23 to 24. The mystery of the missing fountain, which is still a mystery, but it was replaced. Repairs and the painting for the arbors were finished. And then the greatest thing for the museum in my mind was that prior to when I got here, there was not a working computer, there wasn't Wi-Fi, there wasn't a telephone. None of that technology existed at the museum, and now we have all of it. We have Wi-Fi, computer, a printer, copier, scanner, and a telephone. To be completed, there is a leak in the roof that was damaging some of the collection and part of the museum. So that needs to be repaired. There's a temporary fix that they've come up with, but they need to do something permanently. The interior needs to be painted, and as I mentioned before, there are possibly some structural repairs that need to be attended to as well. Here's before and after of the fountain. So there used to be a fountain over on the picture on the left, and somehow it disappeared, and it was gone for about, I think, about 2 years. And so just in June, no, the end of August, it was replaced. The arbors were in terrible shape, and right before the city's birthday, we had them repaired and painted. And then, as I mentioned, all of the technology. And in addition to what I mentioned before, we also have a Vibe Smartboard. If any of you have children who go to school, especially elementary and middle schools, it's like a huge tablet. So it's totally interactive. You're able to communicate with it from like your laptop or tablet. It's, we can have lectures where the lecturer is able to project their PowerPoints from, a laptop or whatever. So it's, it will add a lot to the museum, and it will enable us to possibly free up some space that's currently being used for hanging exhibits and pictures, etc. And the other thing I want to mention is that we have this amazing partnership now with the library department, where they are digitizing and cataloging. So they've already cataloged our entire collection of books, and that's currently available on the website in the libraries department under electronic resources. But we also have tons and tons and tons of scrapbooks that, like, the city clerk's office put together beginning in 1920, and they're huge. And they're also these research, the best thing I can call them is research scrapbooks. So they're binders that are just filled with notes and clippings on a topic like the Hotel Redondo, gambling barges, farming, all these various topics that have been discussed throughout the day, and they're scanning those and making those available on their website as well. So thank you very much to Dana and Douglas Thompson and the other staff at the library who are working on that. It's really making the ability of members of the public to search the museum's collection much easier than it ever was. So things that we still need to do, we have to hire a full-time director and a full-time curator. Right now we have part-time docents who basically unlock the door, allow people to come in, and if they're motivated, they've read some of the information and can answer some questions. We really don't have trained staff to do collections management, to create new exhibits, to do marketing, to do audience development, to create educational programs, interpretive programs, to reach out to the schools. That all requires specialized knowledge and experience. And I think that at a minimum, the museum, in order to reach its potential, or at least move in the direction that it should be moving, needs a full-time director and a curator. We need to develop museum-based and traveling educational exhibits for school kids. We need to catalog and properly store the collection, and we need to create new exhibits and interpretive materials. We need to repair the roof leak, paint the interior, complete structural repairs, purchase and install a track hanging system, and purchase and install lighting for display cabinets. So these are the items that rise to the top of my to-do list and things that we've discussed, that the commission has discussed and recommended to City Council as part of their budget process. But so far, we haven't been able to get funding for them. And then there are partnerships that the commission has been engaged in with other commissions. So you'll probably know these. The Ito Family Open Space is a tribute to a prominent Redondo Beach Japanese-American family and a way to remember the internment of the Japanese Americans during World War II. Walk Through History is a series of signs. The vision is that they will be installed along the walking paths in Dominguez Park, serving as a timeline of key moments in Redondo Beach history. And then Path of History is a series of informational markers located throughout the city, highlighting important events, people and places in the city's history. The project was conceived and originally funded by the Leadership Redondo class of 2002, and more recently it was taken up by the Historical Commission. So the time commitment. Now this is what I'm anticipating that would be really great if it could happen every month. 3 hours volunteering at the museum. Not so much because we necessarily need you to be a docent, but what we really need is for you to become aware of the resources that are available so that when you start attending the city council meetings and the district meetings, you're able to say with passion, we have these resources that aren't available to the public because they haven't been scanned yet, or we don't have space to display them. I mean, we have amazing resources both at the Performing Arts Center that are just in storage and at the Historical Museum that the public really doesn't have easy access to because they're not cataloged for the most part. You just don't know that they exist. People who've been around for years and years and have been working on this, they may know about it, but I mean, I discover things every time I go to the museum because I haven't even gone through every file cabinet and every box. It's something that, I want to do, but, managing the Performing Arts Center is really should be taking up 90% of my time. And the Public Art Commission, we have over $1 million in new public art projects that City Council has approved. So that takes up a huge amount of time as well. Okay, so 3 hours volunteering at the museum. And of course, that might also include an event 1 month or some other project that you're personally interested in. 3 hours preparing for and attending a Public Amenities Commission meeting. So as you know, I mean, your packet today was over 300 pages, right? I mean, I don't think they'll all be that long and detailed, but every commission meeting, as you know, requires, your preparation and thought about questions that you want to ask and the comments that you want to make. So that 3 hours will be shared among all four former commissions. And then 3 hours a month at a city council meeting or a council district, advocating for the museum, promoting the events, and sharing good news. So it's not always, when you go to a district meeting or a council meeting, it's not always to complain. In fact, I hope it's rare that it's to complain or to ask for money. I hope most of the time you can go and brag about, and since you're a consolidated commission, brag about what's going on in historic preservation or the library or the parks or the museum, and then throw in and if we only had this and if we only had that, it could be so much greater. it's wooing the council members to understanding what you find to be valuable and a lot of other people in the community find to be valuable, but, it's not police and fire, And so it's hard to, get attention when you're not police and fire. And thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Question.
And looking forward to working with you.
That was excellent. The two buildings still house the materials, correct?
Well, no, the Morel House is really now set up as a living home of at the turn of the century. So it's furnished like a home would have been in 1910. The collection that's in that house is not part of the city's collection. My understanding that it's the collection of the Historical Society. So it's only the Queen Anne building, which we don't call the Queen Anne Museum. It's the Redondo Beach Historical Museum. And that's another thing that the Historical Commission was engaged in, was trying to get City Council to correct the signage around the city that incorrectly identifies the museum as the Queen Anne Museum. But it's just that building that we call, that contains the collection, the city's
Dominguez
collection.
Park.
In Dominguez Park.
I got you, thank you. And just because I digitized a lot of documents as an engineer, how many books and pages did you guys digitize? I'm curious. That's probably a lot of work.
Well, since I've been here, I would say the library, so the books were cataloged, like you would catalog books in a, so they're available. They're hard copy books. It's just now people can go to the library's website and see that this book exists. Like we have books at the museum. There may only be 2 or 3 copies in existence. I mean, we have some very rare old books. In terms of scanning, well, because I had to work at the museum over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday because we didn't have we've lost I hired 5 docents last year. We're down to 1. So I'm gonna have to hire, some more people soon. But I spent my afternoons there scanning some of the files that were in the file cabinets.
Yeah.
They've been doing the bigger jobs, and I would say they've probably done so far maybe 5,000 pages.
Yeah, okay, that's a lot, that's a lot. I'll just go, appreciate you doing that, that's great.
I have a question. How do you decide what goes into the Morel House, what's kept by the Historical Society? I mean, there must be people in Redondo who have
Yeah.
a whole bunch of things.
So as far as the Morel House is concerned, that's up to the Historical Society, all right? When we get somebody who wants to donate something, as I tried to explain, earlier, there really isn't room in the museum or at the Performing Arts Center for us to do a lot more collecting, which is sad. If it's furniture that they want to donate or something like that, which would make sense to be at the Morel House, we'll refer them to the Morel House. Otherwise, unless it's something that's unique to Redondo Beach, so if it's a typewriter that could have existed, anywhere, it's like, I discourage that. But if it's a typewriter that was made by, a Redondo-based company and that, typewriter was only made in Redondo Beach, and so it's unique to Redondo Beach, then we'll accession it into the collection and store it until we find a place to exhibit it.
I have questions. Okay, hey Gary.
Hi.
I agree with you that the Historical Commission was different than, well, I've also served on the Library Commission, so it's a proactive, initiative-based things for those people on the Parks and Recs who used to see us come over to talk to you. I was a 3-year chair of that. So it's very much initiative. I do take issue with the statement that everything's moving towards event planning. I really think part of the task that's not embodied very clearly in the original mission is to get people excited about the history in the city, to talk about it, to get the third graders, when they come for their projects, to be able to be excited and motivated. And so you mentioned in here about the two committees that you had. One was the experience, but you don't mention, are there any metrics that the museum is putting together, such as a census or a survey or tracking repeat visitors, that lets us as commissioners know where things are working well and where they're not working well?
No.
Okay. Maybe that's something that you might want to present to us. I know you made a statement in here that said that there was no opening of the museum during and after the pandemic, when there was fully staffed volunteers working to keep that museum open and doing 2 birthday party celebrations. So I'm hoping that you start thinking about doing the metrics with regards to that. You mentioned in your overview about the Halloween party. Is that being publicized anywhere?
It hasn't yet.
When is it going to? 26 is coming up. The afternoon Perry Park one's already out. The Historical Society one's out. When do you think it's going to be out?
Well, I want to have a discussion with the department director about whether or not she still thinks it's a good idea, considering the fact that there's going to be another event, a bigger event. I don't want to compete with them if I'm told not to. So I just want to make sure that it's okay with my supervisor to do that.
Oh, isn't she sitting right in front of you?
No, my supervisor is the department director.
Okay. And I guess there's also another Halloween party the night before that's put on by the city as well. The other thing, I'm glad to see that the timeline went back into this discussion. Have you made any progress on the contract for the Path of History markers?
A contract with a designer?
Well, the designer's already submitted her proposal back in July.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so that's still sitting with Elizabeth then.
And I don't know whether this commission is going to take a role in, deciding which markers get done next, or if, that's just going to be, I don't know the process for selecting the markers. I know there's money for it, and so, we're going to move forward with it, but I don't know how they're going to be selected and
Okay.
reviewed and the content approved.
Okay, I was also confused because last year, the commission worked to get $60,000 allocated to history. And what was the problem in getting the interior painted?
The city council didn't specifically say the money could be used for that project.
So was there money left over at the end of the year?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of money left over?
Mm-hmm.
Did the commission do anything to bring it to the council's attention that there's all this money?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
It wasn't a lot of money. Everybody's idea of what is a lot of money. It was probably about $10,000.
Okay.
I have a couple questions pertaining to, and I appreciate the presentation as well. So it sounds like, there's kind of these operational considerations and concerns that you have regarding the running of the Morel House. And then
Museum.
the museum, excuse me, the running of the museum. And then the other component to it is, I wouldn't even say they're capital improvement kind of projects. They're just kind of maintenance kind of considerations as well. So just so I understand, the presentation that included the improvements that we're looking to do, those aren't budgeted at all at this point?
Right.
Okay, so part of what we need is, and as you were saying, is advocacy to have these things. Do we have any kind of cost, like estimation in terms of how much we can go in front of, the council to say, can you appropriate this much? They have mid-year budgets coming up at the end of the calendar year. So
We do have estimates for interior painting, for the track system, for lighting. We don't have estimates for structural repairs because, I mean, we don't really even know for sure what needs to be done, or like repairing a leak in the roof. So those are things where Public Works or an external contractor would have to review the property and really determine what the issues are and then attach a cost to those. So those I don't have estimates for.
The reason I'm asking is that because if you're talking about, let's say, a leak in the roof versus replacing the roof, that a leak in the roof, depending on what the roofing materials, roofing paper, shingles, that's not very much money. Somebody has to do it. If you're talking about painting, does it need to be painted, just kind of touch up situation? Does it need to be completely stripped down and repainted? I think the scope of the improvement is kind of good to understand because I think, asking to have us advocate, we want as much, I don't want to speak for the commission, but I think we'd want as much information to be, to have whatever advocacy be fruitful, right? If we go in front of a council and we say, hey, there's a leaky roof, that can mean replace, that can mean a couple shingles and so we're just trying to have some more clarification in terms of what improvements need to be done. The other component was the operational stuff, right? The need for volunteers. Is it beneficial at all for us to try to solicit volunteers or people that are interested in volunteering at the museum? Is that something, perhaps, we create either a subcommittee on this? And I'm asking because...
Yeah, I don't think so, because what we need are employees. So I need to hire more part-time employees. And I do have money to do that.
Okay, so that's good. Usually money is the issue before anything else, right? Like if you have the funding for it. Is there any kind of, I don't want to say not-for-profit, but any kind of third-party agencies or anything that, bringing into the loop might be beneficial just to make sure that stuff is staffed? For instance, like sometimes you can contract with, any agency that can provide, labor or somebody to be consistently staffed. Because I think one of my concerns just with what you're saying is the turnover, and I know just my professional experience working with municipalities, retaining staff, training them, making sure that you can go through all this, and then to have almost all your staff turnover in 1 year, it's challenging, so.
Yeah. Well, I think Kelly can talk to this too. It's the fact that they're part-time employees.
Sure.
So they find either better paying part-time
Unbenefited,
jobs
no
or they
CalPERS,
get
yeah.
a full-time. So for example, I mean, one of the best docents that we had at the museum got, a job with the library.
Sure.
And I'm thrilled that she did. She deserves it. But that's the kind of thing that, we're up against where, good people are going to find better jobs.
Sure.
So it's a process of, always having to, I mean, I think I'm lucky that I had them for a year. I really do consider myself lucky, and I still have one of them. He has another job at Point Vicente and he works here, but they pay more at Point Vicente, so they get to schedule him first, and then the days that he's still available, he can work for us. But I'm gonna have to hire some more.
And on your point, by the way, and Stacy can verify it, the roofing, when they redid the Morale House roof, it had to be specialized because they're historic buildings, so you can't just hammer in a shingle on it. The back, which is on the landfill, there's probably old automobiles and refrigerators underneath it. They actually have it from the previous repairs on a pylon system. So the last time they had a repair that was necessary 2 years ago, the contractor came and just did the adjustments, and it should be back to normal, and they can move it up and down as needed.
I have a question. Could you email us a link or where we can send people who might be interested in being hired for the position?
Well, what I'll just, once it'll be posted on the city's website. So once, it has to go through an approval process, my boss has approved it, the city manager has to approve it. Once it's posted on the city's website, I'll let Dana know, and you'll be.
I imagine that position is ideally like a local college student.
Well, so they had the guy who had done it for many, many years was an older person.
A retired person?
Yeah. But the 5 that I hired were all younger.
Okay. And what would be just ballpark hourly rate? Just,
We pay between 17 and 20.
I mean, so similar with recreation department?
Yeah, well,
They're
It is,
recreation
it's
supervisors.
technically considered a recreation
Part-time
leader, right? So in the job description, when you see it on the website, it'll say museum docent / recreation leader.
Okay, so I'll just, before we would send it out, just if you can, if we have more details to send out, there's people we can, in the community, we can give that information and then maybe generate some interest.
Okay, the thing is, until it's posted on the website, though, I won't be able
can't.
to interview anybody. And
So it just at that point, if we
Yeah.
can know.
I had one.
thank you, that'd be great.
Sorry, I had one last question, and if you clarify this, I apologize. Are there any active committees specific to the Historical Commission? Just because I'm just trying to understand if there's any subcommittees or anything else.
Right. Well, so there are, in the report, in the administrative report, I listed two. I think they were called,
The Visitor Experience Committee?
right, and marketing and audience, well, I can't remember what the other one was called. But they haven't really met and,
Marketing.
and done anything. So so I would say they're not active, but they're,
They were established.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, any other questions before, oh, do we have any e-comment?
Quick question.
Oh, sorry.
So the docents are considered a recreation and park, what did you call them?
Supervisor leads, I guess.
Supervisor or
Well-
lead. Are these people that are all in kind of like a similar pool, and say someone, that works at Wilderness Park part of the time wants to pick up hours at the museum? Is there any crossover there?
Yes, technically there is. So we do have one part-time employee who does work at a recreation or a park center and the museum. It's definitely possible to do. But once again, the issue that you run up against is that typically parks, once they're people for so many hours, they will maximize the amount of hours that they're able to use a part-time employee for, because you can't go over a certain amount of hours before you have to start paying benefits. So, we also have part-time employees at the Performing Arts Center that we have to watch their hours because they have to be, we have to keep them under, what is it, $9.99?
I was just thinking about these.
But it is possible. It's definitely
For
possible.
the after-school staff. I don't know what their hours are, but they're only like 4 hours or less, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible for that crossover.
Yeah.
I think probably the biggest challenge is just someone having the interest in being at the museum. And I think part of that is also, I think there's this impression that they need to know every exhibit and all the information, which would be ideal. But at this point, we are open to training and to kind of gearing that team into being a little bit more knowledgeable on certain things. But it's really more of the visitor experience and more of a walkable, the way it's currently is. So, there's challenges on both ends. So, but yeah, if we're always open to that crossover, and if we have employees that have
was just-
availability and interest, we certainly would be open to that.
I guess I was just wondering if that's like widely known, if you communicate that to your staff, and if you want to get more hours or whatever, there's these other positions or shifts that need to be filled.
Yeah, it does get a little difficult too, because in our after-school program staff tend to work our summer camps. And so combined with those two programs, they almost exceed the number of hours per year that they can
Oh,
allot.
it's a yearly.
It's a yearly calculation. And so
Oh.
there is those constraints as well. So we're
it's like
certainly up
weekly.
against a few different
Gotcha.
kind of, issues and trying to get it staffed. But certainly we're always open to being flexible as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any e-comment for item J4?
There are no e-comments or
Oh,
attendees for this.
excuse me, J5.
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion to receive and file an overview of the former Historical Commission, including active committees?
I'll make a motion to receive those.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I'm opposed, by the way. I think it's a misleading report. So you can write me down as an opposed.
Okay. All right, moving on to item J6, receive and file overview of the former Library Commission.
Okay, we'll get this brought up in just a second. I wanted to say thank you all for coming, and wanted to provide you with an overview of the Redondo Beach Public Library system and a little bit background on what the commission's done, Library Commission has done in the past. First of all, our mission is Redondo Beach Public Library provides services and materials in a welcoming atmosphere to meet the information, educational, recreational, and cultural needs of all library users. And yes, that is a picture of our current library card, and we'll probably update the logo once we've run out of library cards, and we reorder it, we'll have the new logo on there. Next slide. A little bit of history of the Redondo Beach Public Library. It's over 100 years old. We have had staff work and curate information on all the different incarnations of the library over the years, but you can tell from a cursory look, libraries were important to the city of Redondo Beach, and it was maintained over the years until we got to the point where we are here today, where we have two libraries. The main library, which is adjacent to council chambers, and our North Branch Library, which is located on Artesia Boulevard. Currently, the library is comprised of 12 full-time staff members and approximately 32 part-time employees. The annual budget is just over $4 million, with additional financial support provided by the Friends of the Redondo Beach Public Library, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. We have a physical collection of over 300,000 materials, and in addition to the physical materials, we also have ebooks, downloadable audiobooks, magazines, streaming video, online databases, and we still have DVDs, which are still popular. Next slide. A little overview of the services. Obviously, the primary service is to operate two libraries that are open to the public. But also key, as you could tell in their mission statement, is creating a welcoming environment for folks. We still answer reference questions, and reference is actually quite busy. We provide public computer access and internet access. So anytime during the day people are using our public computers, they're also using our free Wi-Fi access. We have a nice website, which I'll show you in a little bit later, and a full collection of physical materials as well as digital materials. Staff also conduct programs for all ages, outreach. We also provide a service called Interlibrary Loan, where just about any material in the, basically in the world, but certainly in the US, is loanable to you for a small fee. Public study rooms, public meeting rooms, public printing and scanning. We still provide tax forms. And we, up until around COVID, we did proctoring exams. We're looking at bringing that back in the near future. Next slide. Then to give you a little bit of, I don't have to go through all of this information, but you can see here from our main library, the physicalities of our operations as far as how large the main library is, the number of days and hours a week we're open, as well as the annual visits, the size of the collection, and the number of programs broken down by age group and the total attendance. And the next slide. North Branch, similarly, both locations are very popular, and we try to make sure we have equitable service at both locations. Next slide. Here's the organization chart of the library. The tiles in red are full-time permanent positions. Titles in blue are part-time positions. We are currently recruiting for a library manager. We also are recruiting for part-time reference librarian and also part-time library clerk. That information's on the Human Resources website. All the details there, but you can kind of see from that a little bit of breakdown of how the operation works. We're a small but mighty organization. Next slide. This is a little bit of a breakdown of services by specific areas. Again, I don't need to go into all of this, but it's information provided for you so you can see each one of those positions actually are assigned a lot of work to accomplish for our library. Next slide. There are several policies that the library maintains. One of our most important policies is our material selection policy, available on the website. I didn't include it here, but it's certainly something that Library Commission reviewed back in 2007, and that identifies the scope of our collection, criteria for selection, the tools that we utilize to select materials, as well as collection maintenance, donations, and policy as far as implementation responsibility. The other important document is our rules of conduct approved by City Council way back in 2022. I think that was the last iteration. I think the rules of conduct goes back a little bit further than that. And the other thing to keep in mind as well is that many, if not most all of our fines and fees are included in the city's master fee schedule, and that gets approved annually. So anytime we would want to maybe adjust the fees for the use of the meeting room, that's in there. Anytime we want to adjust anything like overdue fines, that's in there. That's all set forth as far as the master fee schedule. This comes into importance when commission might want to look at a specific area, revise the fee schedule, and then we're trying to make sure that we hit that moving target because that's an annual fee schedule approved by council. It's not that we can't change anything, it's just that it's done once a year. Next slide. Just briefly, our new website, we're pretty proud of it. Staff worked really hard on aggregating all the information to make the website as clean and easily to navigate as possible. Next slide. This is just a representation of our physical catalog, our catalog of physical materials, although that's a little erroneous because many of our ebooks are included as well. It's just not a complete representation of all of the materials that are available. And at another time, if commission wishes, I can go into more detail about the ins and outs of that, but a nice clean online catalog where patrons can go in and renew their materials, see the status of their account, and also renew their materials if need be. Next slide. We also have a mobile app where much of our catalog functions are available via the app. It gets utilized quite a bit. One of the nice features of the app is that when you sign in, you can create what's called a digital library card. So then your physical library card, as long as you have your digital library card in your app, then you don't need the physical library card. Next slide. A little bit about the resources I think we were talking about earlier. Library staff has worked diligently over the years to create a nice archive of Redondo Beach history, which includes city directories, yearbooks, and historic newspapers, including the Reflex. I would like to mention that we are in the process of working with Los Angeles County to digitize the historic Daily Breeze. That is in process. It's ongoing, but my understanding is the materials are being scanned as we speak. And if I have an update as far as when that'll be released to the general public, I'll let you know. Next slide. Just a brief cursory overview of the electronic resources that we have here. I don't go into great detail on everything, but we have everything from language learning software to newspaper research to the New York Times and our e-content. Novelist, for example, is a nice piece of software to help people find their next favorite reading material based on their previous experiences. Next slide. And then the library, this is true of many libraries across the country, are also engaged in collecting what we call non-traditional items, so outside the scope of books. So library, through a state grant, is providing free park passes. And I believe what's coming soon are backpacks that can be checked out. And they have a lot of little accoutrements to make the experience or visits to the park a little bit more educational and informative. The library also has a small collection of book club in the bag. Those were collected prior to my coming on board, but materials to help individuals in the community conduct their own book group, memory kits, and STEAM kits. Next slide, please. just a representation of our physical online calendar of events. It's important to realize that the city has a citywide calendar of events, and the library has a subset of its own. So because there are so many things going on at the library, so many events, what have you, it might be a little overwhelming to put that on the citywide calendar. So we have our own individual calendar. And if there's something that we feel merits it, we will put it on the citywide calendar. But it's an important distinction that we maintain our own calendar of events. Next slide. And this is our library services newsletter, goes out once a month. This is just a small portion of it. I just had to cut it off. It would be unviewable if I put the whole thing into the slide. But we have staff that actively engages in our email newsletter, which is quite popular. It takes a lot of work to aggregate all of the programs and put it into an email, but we find that compared with social media and other avenues, our email marketing tends to be the most responsive and most popular way to market library materials and events. Next slide. The library also coordinates many volunteers, most of them young people, as you can see from this slide. And as a staff put together, we had a 66% increase in teen volunteers, a 34% increase in teen hours, 50% increase in adult volunteers, and 31% increase in adult hours. So it's a robust program, and I think it's integral to our summer reading program as far as preparation and implementation of our summer reading program, which I'll talk about soon. The Friends of the Library provide a lot of support for the library. They fundraise through their bookstore, their book sale, individual donations, and memberships. Some of the things that they help support, but it's not certainly exclusive, but they do support majority of the summer reading program, both adult and youth, and then they've recently supported adult programming. So those are maybe author events, music events, craft events, that sort of thing. And then anything that we would like to pilot, I mean, we would have to make a request to the Friends to sponsor something. It's not just a given, but we would write a proposal, present it at their board meeting and say, well, this is something we would like to do at the library if we could secure funding from the Friends. They also have their own volunteers. It's important to remember that the Friends of the Redondo Beach Public Library is a separate organization from the city. Obviously, they're set up as a support mechanism, but they're their own organization. So the volunteers that they bring on board and train are very separate from the volunteers the library might bring on board and train. And the ones that the library brings on board, of course, they have to comply with the city rules and regulations regarding volunteers. Next slide. I thought it would be nice to include, because some of the other presentations included a little bit of a calendar of special events. For us, these are some of the major events that we look to each year. We have National Library Card Sign-Up Month, which we did a big promotion for, Banned Book Week, National Friends of the Library Week, National Library Week, and of course our summer reading program, which has grown from many years ago and is primarily targeted for young people and to kind of help what they call the summer slide, which is when kids get out of school in the spring and then they go out and recreate, they don't read a book maybe, and then they come back in the fall and there's the summer slide. So the summer reading program was meant to kind of remedy that by providing a fun and engaging program with activities and reading challenges. And then it started with youth and it's expanded to all ages now because we want to make sure adults can engage in that activity as well. So next slide. A little bit about the summer reading program. Staff put this together, and you can see that our goal this year was to have over 2,000 people sign up for the program. You can see that 2,047 actually did, so we met our goal. You can see the number of programs and activities. You can also see the breakdown by participation in the program. So we're pretty proud of the fact that we had an 8% increase with our children, 34% increase in teens, and 114% increase in our adult participants. And then very much important below is the number of book reviews submitted And you can kind of see from the participation, it was a very successful program. Next slide. One of the projects that Library Commission has been an advocate for was our Express Library Access, which is sometimes in the library world called Open Plus. This program we're getting pretty close to being able to launch it for the public, but what it provides is it provides public access to the library during unstaffed hours. So there's a lot of criteria there. It's not like we're just opening the door and having it be a free-for-all, because that's usually the first thing I get when I hear, when I talk about Open Plus or Express Library Access. We did a lot of preparation. We actually received some funding from this California State Library on this grant. So the components are, our goal is to allow people to use the library independently outside of staffed hours at the library. In order to do that, one component is that we installed security cameras throughout the public areas of the library. So that's one little encouragement to make sure that people behave. The other part of it is that we have what's called access control. So I don't know how many people here, but I think most people work in some place where they have to bring in a badge and they have to scan something. So access control in the library world in regards to Open Plus means you have a library card and a PIN. You would go up to a door, scan that library card, put your PIN in, it identifies you, and then registers that you are actually permitted to use the service, and then the door opens automatically and you can make use of the library. The other big component of the program is that it requires an application, and we need to adjust your library card to provide you with access to the service. So in addition to having a library card, you have to read the rules and regulations, apply for open access hours, and once you've gone through the process, then you're allowed to use the library. There's an orientation, and then the service can always be if there's any sort of infraction, the privilege can be taken away. So that's stipulated in the rules and the agreement. If it's a discussion item in the future, I can bring forth all of the application process, the agreement people have to sign to make use of the service. But it's something we're pretty proud of because it took a lot of work. For my work at Ventura County Library, we had Hill Road Library was an Open Plus library, and it was in operation for over 5 years without any incidents. It was a very popular way to provide additional library services without incurring a great deal of cost. And at no time did it reduce the number of staff. In fact, we actually ended up hiring additional staff because it became our #1 circulating branch in the county. So we needed more people to help shelve and do other things. So it's not meant to be any sort of a deterrent for as far as staffing. It usually means that we require more staff. The best way to put it is it allows us to put staff in the areas that we feel are the most important, like programming or collection development. Next slide, please. So in addition to what I listed here, Open Plus Library Commission over the years has been extremely, I think, as one of my colleagues said, an advocate for the library. So they advocated for the Open Plus program. During COVID, obviously the library had to close down, and we came back with limited hours. The Library Commission advocated for the expanding of operational hours. To this day, they're almost completely pre-pandemic. They're not completely pre-pandemic, but they're pretty close, and we're happy to be able to accomplish that. The creation of the library management position, which I can go into greater detail, but basically we had a very seasoned staff member retire last year and put in about 25 years with us. Their job title was senior librarian. So after doing an assessment of the classification, we came to the determination that a library manager title would be more appropriate for the position. And again, at any time I can go into more detail on that, but the Library Commission helped us advocate for that position, and we received it actually as part of the budget process. I should say that ended up being a budget neutral title change, so we didn't incur any additional costs. We just did some reallocating. Of course, budget increases for the collections and services, as you know, everything is going up. And so when we get X amount of money for a collection, over time, it means that we're buying less because the cost of books and ebooks can be very expensive. One of the other items that we explored in the Library Commission was the fine-free. Many of the libraries in Southern California are fine-free. When we did the last report, administrative report, 2/3 of the public libraries in Southern California were fine-free. That's a discussion item that we may want to bring back and revisit over the next year. And then very recently, the Library Commission established a subcommittee on marketing, because one of the things that comes up all the time is that we have all these great resources, programs, and services. Why aren't people taking advantage of it? So the subcommittee on marketing provided a great deal of insight and a lot of measures that we were able to take to help increase our marketing endeavors. Next slide. And then at any regular meeting, and I plan on doing this in the future, I just didn't want to overwhelm everybody, but at our Library Commission meetings, we would have a director's report, would be a summary of major things going on at the library, major accomplishments, maybe things that we're talking about doing or investigating. We would also provide a circulation statistics report that kind of shows you current and previous year circulation by month, the physical visits to the library, the number of library card registrations, how many programs that we've done, as you saw in the slide earlier, of sort of how many people are coming to our programs, how many adult, youth, and teen programs are being performed at each location, and then also the library calendar of events. Next slide. I guess that's it. And then I'm available for any questions.
Got one for you, sir.
Yeah.
Just simple. What are the exams you guys proctored? I'm curious about what.
Oh, that's a really good
I'm
question.
just interested in that, that's all.
I've been involved with them for many years, and you think that that would go away with the internet. But as people take remote courses, we would get contacted by a student. They would need to take a physical exam at the library. Now, it may be something that comes in a booklet, or it could be even something that's online, but they need to be basically observed doing the test without using extracurricular materials or unsanctioned materials. I don't have information as far as what school or academic subject area. I can just say that it's quite popular, and most of our libraries in the area, Palos Verdes, Torrance, I think El Camino performs the service, and we try to make sure that our fees for the service are competitive with that.
Interesting, thank you. Didn't know about that.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
To what do you attribute the increase in volunteerism? Because it was significant, right? Students were 60%, adults were 50%, and that's significant year over year. So do you feel that it was a factor of 2022, we're still coming out of COVID, and then 23, 24, is more of we're getting back into the swing of things? Or was there something that the library did to encourage the increase in volunteerism?
I would bring our youth services manager for a fuller report on that, but my understanding is the amount of outreach and promotion that they did to the schools helped increase that word of mouth. I think that they really try to provide volunteer activities that are engaging and fun. And my understanding is, of course, for young people, there is a demand for them to be involved in extracurricular activities. And I think the library opportunity is one that works out well for their schedule and location.
Reason why I'm asking is that maybe, maybe we could understand that magic and apply it to the Historical Commission, things that we'd like to accomplish, see if there's any, overlap over there. The other thing this is just a question out of curiosity. How do you tabulate the visits? Is it a physical body walking into the building, or is it, card swipes, or?
I'm just finding, because it's very scientific, we have actually pretty old gate counters, but they work. And then they take the total number and divide by 2. So if somebody walks through and leaves, that's 2. It counts as 1 visit. But we do have those, and I think it wouldn't be high on my wish list, but I have worked at libraries where we've installed actual people counters, and those are just amazing because they're bi-directional and they also give you gate counts by hour of the day. So then you can, you could use that to adjust staffing, but it's a pretty remedial gate count.
Got it. Thank you.
Question, actually, first a follow-up, and I think it goes to Desiree's point. What we found when I was on the library commission is the library is one of the gems of the community. People, when they look at Redondo Beach, then they see the library. It's something that inspires them. They enjoy coming. It's a nice, warm, welcoming place. So I think it's a big part of it. They always are welcoming, and as Dana said, that they have innovative programs. I did want to thank you, though, for the Daily Breeze update. It sounds like it's moving forward. You had mentioned over the last year about all the glitches with Open Plus. It sounds like that we're getting near the end of that. Is there a proposed date that it might go live?
We're hoping as soon as possible. I don't have the date set, but currently we have some secret shoppers that are kind of working out the kinks of it. But I would say fundamentally, operationally, the system works, the access control works. Obviously, the cameras are up and running. We're hoping soon. I wish I could give you a specific answer for that, but we're hoping soon. And the other thing, to your point, I just want to mention it because I feel like it can't get mentioned enough, and that is that the reason for the library's success is really the fact that we have an amazing staff that is, I like to say, kind and knowledgeable, because those are two key components. Every time I walk by the circulation desk and someone's issuing a new library card, it's like they're doing it the first time, and it's that kind of excitement about the materials and what they're getting with a library card. It's really heartening, so I really had to give them a shout out.
That's great.
Are you planning on giving tours to the commission like you did last year?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a quick question. It's just a general question. So on this last slide, it says that you, often will provide the director's report and a few other things at these commission meetings. Moving forward, are we going to be getting director's reports from every department that falls under the purview of this commission, or is it just the department which we're hearing business for?
Well, I think that's probably, again, comes to something that might be a discussion for a commission, because as I understand it, and I can't speak for them, but some other departments provided quarterly reports. Some, like the library, were monthly. It could be something if the commission feels like, A, it's overwhelming to get a lot, or if they would rather alternate month to month. I think it'd be really up to what the commission would like to see, and the workload of the individual department. Because the libraries have been doing this for years, it's not insurmountable that we continue doing it, obviously. But then to request that kind of information on a regular basis from other departments, I wouldn't want to speak as far as their workload. But I think it's open to commission, basically, as far as recommendations and suggestions.
And those are very detailed reports that go on for pages, so.
Well, I'm speaking from my experience on the Recreation and Parks Commission, and we got a director's report every commission meeting. They didn't go on for pages and pages.
He does a written report and an oral report.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my plan is to incorporate it for the library each month, and then if on a item basis something that you would like to see, we can have that discussion.
Would that be something that would be in the bylaws?
Yeah, I was
Or
about to say
specific?
that might be a discussion item we can table until we get to the next item. Anybody else have any questions?
Can I ask a follow-up question on that new program? Do you have a schedule set up to sort of follow along, the process, the infractions or anything, that could come up? Is there a schedule already set up for that?
are you talking about our Open Plus, open access system? Okay. Basically, it comes down to a violation of our rules of conduct, which is available on the webpage. And then, of course, anything that would be construed as illegal, which is covered under the rules of conduct. You know, our hope is, you know, we don't have to get too far into the minutia, but our rules of conduct and what is an individual illegally able to do, we think covers most everything, but it could be that we encounter something else. But the two primary things are obviously not doing anything illegal, and then our rules of conduct. And we haven't set up a stipulation right now. If the violation's serious enough, and that would be an administrative decision, their privilege would be revoked. But it also could be something that if it was relatively minor, we could have that discussion with them and, you know, say, hey, you know, don't do that. Or it might be something
I
we
want to
could do about it.
rephrase my question.
so-
Maybe I wasn't clear.
Sorry.
So, okay, so you get the program up and running, you start it.
Yes.
And then at what point do you begin your evaluation as to how it's running?
Right. Usually for these types of things, they say 6 months to a year. And what we can do is we can get a lot of data with the system as far as when it's being utilized. Right now, the program is set to launch and provide service Monday through Thursday between the hours of 9 a.m. and 11. And again, I can come back with a fuller report. If we want to expand those hours, it's something we'd investigate. But as far as the data, we can get, I think, pretty good data as far as who's taking advantage of the program, how frequent they're using the program, and even what materials they're checking out, if any.
Okay, before we make a motion to receive and file, do we have any comment?
There are no e-comments or attendees for this item.
Okay, do we have a motion for J6, receive and file overview of the former Library Commission?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So moving on to J2, discussion and possible action regarding the Public Amenities Commission's bylaws and subcommittee appointments. Do we want to have a discussion? I think we had previously spoken about, you know, a little bit with how we wanted to approach bylaws. I think based on our conversation, do we want to try to establish a date and time? And then additionally, do we want to establish the subcommittees with this item, or do we want to continue that item altogether to the next meeting?
I think, so two things. I think it's important that we at least at minimum establish the minor alteration I can't get it out, the minor alteration subcommittee because of the work that it does is ongoing. Having served on that particular committee, you know, things come up and we haven't been able to really work because of our canceled meetings. So I would say that particular committee is pretty important. As to the other ones, you know, maybe we could have a little bit of a discussion to see if there were other ones that we felt were important to, you know, to vote on tonight. And then I think that the day and time would be important as well.
I would agree. I would add to that the other recreation committees that I would add to that list, the facilities users, and I think the volunteer committee as well, because they both have ongoing. And then whatever other previous committees we may need to add to that list. And I would then say we make one motion with the list of those committees. And then do another motion on the day and time.
So I have a question for you then, Dana. If we, let's say, want to adopt all the pre-existing subcommittees to this commission actively as a motion tonight, do we have to establish who is going to be on those commissions at this meeting, or could that be continued once we get the bylaws established with how many people?
You know, I honestly don't know. But does anyone here have any experience with subcommittees?
Yeah. Okay, so when I was on historical, we probably had 20, 25 different subcommittees, and I'm actually going to be, well, every project, you know, our rule was you can have a subcommittee of 1, 2, or 3, and you bring everything back to the group as a whole. That's when we were meeting every other month because of COVID. So we got a lot of work done that way. I think you can gauge the interest of the people. I personally would like to see bringing history outdoors subcommittee, because some of the projects that Mr. Margolis did describe is like the Path of History, like the Edo Park, like the walk timeline are outdoors. And I know with those projects, we actually came, for example, on Edo Park, we came to the Parks and Recs. We came to the Parks and Recs twice, actually, because once to get it named and once to actually come up with the design. Same thing with the walk through history, the timeline. That was also something that we did jointly. So for me, it's a good synergy, because now I don't have to go visit 2 different groups. I can visit one. So I would like to see that formed as well.
So we're talking about.
Didn't you have a specific question about if we're able to proceed with that motion?
Yes, so
And Kelly was about to answer.
Yeah, you do not have to fill the subcommittee this evening. If you want to create it, you can, but no work obviously can be done until you fill the seats on the subcommittee.
Right.
So, and if it's helpful too, what we could do is if there are some that are time sensitive, such as I'm going to mess it up now.
Minor
alterations subcommittee, sorry. You could certainly fill just that one. And what we could is at the next meeting, create a report that has all current or all previously active subcommittees all in one form. So you can see kind of a comprehensive list. Because what I just cautioned this evening, if I'm not speaking out of turn here, the purview of this commission is large.
Yes,
and I just want to make sure that you guys are entering into any subcommittee with that understanding and possibly a prioritization. There may be a subcommittee that you say needs attention this year, and next year we'll get to the rest of them. However you want to do it, we can also do that as another option if you'd like, and come with a more comprehensive list instead of it piecemealed into 4 different presentations.
So and again, what I was thinking is maybe, and in discussion with the rest of the commission, maybe we have 4 different former commissions that kind of consolidated and became this. Maybe if there's interest from each commissioner for maybe 2 of those 4 things, and then those just be committees. And then whatever kind of subcommittees just fall under the purview of projects. And they can be like liaisons to like department-specific activities, and bring it back to the general commission, and we can have discussions on that. I was kind of thinking structuring something, because once we start to establish all these different subcommittees, then there's going to be a lot of interfacing. I mean, I'm looking here and we got, managers or directors from 4 different departments within the city. That's a lot of staff time. And so again, these are kind of bylaw discussions, right? So I think my original question was, do we want to make a motion and just say, hey, look, all the existing subcommittees, we're going to continue that work here. We can always dissolve the subcommittees if we subsequently find out that we're not using them, or there's just kind of a waste of time. But then the other component is, do we want to add, to your point, do we want to add additional subcommittees at this point as well?
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of the other criteria, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you establish a subcommittee, you're supposed to detail the goal of the subcommittee and then have
Correct.
a specific time frame so that those goals are achieved. That was my understanding. So as far as that configures into the recommendation, we would just want to make sure that those were incorporated. I think if you want to create these committees, as was said earlier, I think that's something you could do, and then we could staff them in another meeting, and if we staff them, then we would put the goals in the
So to satisfy that requirement, the motion, if we want to adopt all the previously established subcommittees, we would have to include that adopting the previous goals and regulations or whatever they were defined into. So that would be a part of the motion for the existing subcommittees. And then if we have new subcommittees, that has to be defined as well.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe make a suggestion. I think that, the previous commission structure was probably a little bit better in this, not better, I don't want to say better, but probably allowed us to focus in on these subcommittees for each of the different commissions. So better in the sense of allowing, I know, for instance, on the Preservation Commission, the minor alterations subcommittee was somewhat time intensive because as requests would come in, the two individuals would really need to work with staff to be able to get out there. There were several of us that weren't able to do that. And I think that looking at the fact that there are really only 7 of us here, and we're talking, roughly speaking, if we just take the previous subcommittees, you're talking 6 to 8 that I heard about, and a recommendation for a new one. I might suggest waiting to add any new ones. But also, I heard something I thought, very important for us to consider, which is a priority. Because I'm looking at the 7 of us, and I don't know what each of us does for a living, but I can recognize that some people will not be able to serve on 2 and 3 subcommittees with, the commission meeting as well. So perhaps we could allow staff to go back, work together, prioritize, find opportunities to minimize, and come back with a recommendation. I know myself, I'm not able to, I understand what was presented today, but I may not know the importance and the level of workload that each subcommittee might require. And so I don't know if I'm able to make a decision not only on the need for the subcommittee, but also the charge for each of those subcommittees. So I would ask that we throw it back to staff, and I apologize for doing that because I know how busy you all are, but I would think that would allow us to make a better decision with all of that information.
I'm also wondering if it would be beneficial for the people that served on those subcommittees to write a brief little summary and maybe how many hours, that subcommittee took from them. And I think that might be a little bit easier on the staff,
I also think that our chair should be part of this process until the next meeting and meet with Director Vinke and maybe somebody in community services, just to get some guidance, find out what the clerk's office wants, how you should be structuring it. Because I think that would, it's good to get the staff input, but it should be a collaborative effort between the commission and them, and I think that would be beneficial.
If I could add, it seems right now from all the committees that we've seen, there were 3 that have ongoing things.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be possible to maybe just focus on those 3 tonight and then get the staff recommendation for the rest as an idea? I mean, for one of them,
I would second that.
the facilities committee, we actually were trying to have a meeting in October with the facility users.
Mm-hmm.
And so that alone right there, I mean, would be
That makes
something-
sense to me, but
Yeah, I mean, we can make the motion
You know,
if we,
I would just hate to see work kind of slowed down or even halted just because of bureaucracy. I'm not saying all 8 of them. I think at some point we get to that, but I think it was 3 that had kind of issues that kind of need to go forward.
mm-hmm.
And if we do that, we'll need to staff them, right? Because then that way you can have your meeting.
I would go with the people who are already on it. I mean, I would volunteer for
Yeah.
that.
And I would like to be on
For
that
the-
one again too.
but do we have, so this is, I guess, a conversation for the bylaws as well. How many people are we going to put?
I wonder, since we don't have bylaws right now, if we can just, we kind of do what we want. And if you just make a recommendation for the existing named committees to continue, and then if we can, I guess, agendize them for the next meeting, that we would add that.
I don't think there's anything in the bylaws that talk about subcommittees or committees
Right?
in there.
It's kind of just,
amount.
because technically they
So it's
they
commission
don't
can decide.
exist, but they do exist. So we're just trying to find a way that they can exist.
Okay, so we're going to have a massive motion here, so we're going to have to put it together kind of, because we also in this motion have to remove or continue the bylaws component with adopting the establishment of those 3 previously existing subcommittees with their defined goals and objectives, do we want to name the three the subcommittees?
I think for clarity.
So can,
amenities.
I think we should
mean,
call them committees, not subcommittees, because
They are committees.
They are
They're-
they are
committees,
committees
yeah.
now. So the minor alteration committee,
The facilities.
the
user.
facility user committee,
and the volunteer committee, I think was the other.
and,
Acknowledgement.
and the volunteer acknowledgement
Yes.
committee.
Financial expenditure that we need to keep going with, so that one needs to be, yes, definitely.
And then the discussion for all the other previously existing committees will be for the next meeting. And then they would be, the three committees that we're going to proceed with going forward are going to consist of,
For the next meeting at least, yeah.
okay, so the existing people on those three committees will continue their work as a part of this commission with the same defined goals and objectives as previously established. Are we okay with making that motion?
I think if the amendment, I think most of the committees you mentioned have two people on it now. So there would be an opportunity to add a third person at the next meeting if that's, would be acceptable. And that would be my suggested amendment.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I apologize for interrupting, but because this is technically a new commission, we probably should go into and add into the motion who is serving on the commissions. Even if it's just a carryover of who
Yes.
was, I just want to make it clear that we know for the Public Amenities Commission, these
Sure.
are who's serving. So I just
would
want
it-
to,
Would that
Okay.
still be able to do in the one motion, or should we do that first and then?
you can do it however you want. And
Okay.
honestly, you could do a series of motions. Certainly don't have to, you could do one that just says, let's create this committee. And then the second one could be these people serving on it. You can do it in a series, whatever is easier.
And then the third one would be the meeting time.
So you could do the, as you name the committee, just the name of the person.
Sure. So the motion that we have tabled tentatively includes continuing all the previous, or
Three.
the three commissions, the three subcommittees that are now committees. Again, the minor alteration,
And add her.
yeah, that's going to be a second motion. The minor alteration, the facility user, and the volunteer acknowledgement committees. The rest of the previously existing committees will be for discussion for the next meeting. And that's the motion. And then we'll make another motion to staff it. And then we'll make another motion for continuing the bylaws as well as the time and date for the meeting. Okay,
I'll second that, what you just said.
okay.
Good.
Fortunately,
We'll second it, but won't repeat it.
Okay, let's vote.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, all in favor?
wait, public comment.
Oh, do we have any?
No, there are no e-comments or attendees.
Okay. Okay. So the second component of this item is let's continue the bylaws discussion for the next meeting. However, we will like to establish that we meet on the second Wednesday of each month at 6:30 PM.
I motion, or I second that.
What's the date on the calendar?
Yeah, that's what I was just trying.
Can I ask a question? In tabling the discussion of the bylaws until next month, is it possible to ask staff to bring us back a proposal or a draft bylaw for this new commission?
We can ask them that in a subsequent item on the
Okay.
agenda.
Then I'll second that motion.
But I would want you still to be the liaison to reach out to staff so that you get some input and partnership on it.
Okay, so we're going to go to a vote then. So second Wednesday of each month at 6:30 PM.
Right, and then when you adjourn, then you'll want to adjourn to November 13th, but just keeping that in mind.
Okay.
Say that again?
Oh, you're going to establish this regular time meeting, and then when we adjourn, we just want to make sure we adjourn to the November 13th
That'll be our next
date at
step.
6:30.
And also continue the bylaw discussions until that meeting as well then.
Yes, and the only thing is, I want to, since the bylaws, it's a lot incorporating the many commissions into one. I would like to talk to my colleagues, so city clerk, and see how reasonable it is to have any sort of facsimile by next month. So I just want to be just caution about, it can be accomplished. I just don't know if it could be accomplished by our next meeting. We might have some updates for you that we can provide, but I don't think, it might be unrealistic to say we'll have a robust draft of the bylaws for you.
Updates
Sure.
and recommendations.
mean,
And
it
I'll
seems-
point out the library commission bylaws that are in here, that was a 6-month process from the time it was proposed by the city to the
Thank you.
time it got adopted.
Right.
Sure.
I just want
Sorry,
everyone to be
Mom.
realistic about it.
It just seems like the meat of all the bylaws are very similar for all of these.
It's supposed to
So
be
it just
standardized
seems
at one
like
point.
the key functions are kind of what we kind of have to focus on. So
So is the understanding that we're operating under the individual bylaws? So for example, for the Preservation Commission, if we have business for next meeting, are we operating under?
I don't think so, because we have to create new bylaws for this particular commission. Whether we take in components of the previous commission's bylaws, that's to be determined, but that's what we're trying to figure out.
And I should mention that in the city code, there are rules and regulations regarding the overall operation of meetings and commissions. So we want to make sure that anything we do doesn't run afoul of those, but it also helps us set forward things that we can do so we can continue to regularly meet. We can continue to make decisions as a commission.
And I would also point out that, again, going back to the library commission, the clerk said that they were no longer valid. Those were going on for years. So it was like 20 years of doing commission activity without bylaws.
Exactly. My understanding is we were operating within the code, but we didn't have a formal, as they said, formally approved set of bylaws for the library, to my knowledge, since the commission was created. We're getting a little close to almost doing it last year, but.
We're okay to operate.
Okay, so pertaining to the motion that we have, then, does somebody want to make a motion to adopt the second Wednesday of each month at 6:30 PM and continue the bylaws discussion to the next meeting?
All motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay,
and then we have to
staff the subcommittees. So who was on the previous facility user? Commissioner McCauley?
I was,
I was.
and me.
Is there anybody else that would want to jump onto that committee?
You can always add more later.
Okay,
You have 3, so I don't know if you can add on, but.
well, I can, depending on the interest, we can see if someone wants to come onto something else or not, but, okay. And then for the preservation.
Minor alterations.
Excuse me, the minor alterations committee, how many people were on
So
the?
there were 2,
Uh-huh.
myself and Chair Matsuno, but he is not on this commission, so we do need 2, correct?
Is there anybody that wants to participate on the minor alterations committee?
I can do it for a month until we come back to
We
the
need
next.
commitment.
Well, I know, but I have
commitment,
my
so-
own, as you will hear when we get to member referrals, I have my own goals that I would like to accomplish in the only 2-year period that I have on this commission, so.
We get you for a month?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would like to help out, and it'd probably be something, I want to be supportive of Stacy, but she's not going to be here. so.
I mean, with respect, at the same time too, I think we would really not like to have to deal with turnover with the city staff, even though it's unfortunate, right? I don't think they want another,
Okay.
so, and I appreciate you saying if you only wanted to commit to it for like a month, but
I'm hoping you agree to one of the committees that I would like to do. So I have bandwidth to do it, so.
Is there anybody else who would want to do it?
I would like to know a little bit more about it before I committed to.
You have the background for it, though.
Yeah, it interests me, but I
So
also,
Stacy can speak most eloquently about it.
Thank you. We did 4 subcommittee meetings over the last reporting period. I do want to say that the minor alteration subcommittee is actually in the preservation ordinance, so it's a subcommittee that's required of the city for all of our small preservation projects. I want to say our meetings are about 30 minutes, 2 or 3 projects that I present to you and walk you through the criteria for each and the background for each. It's a little bit different with preservation because we're dealing with current planning projects, right? These are homeowners that are processing, that are waiting for permits, right? It's a little bit more critical than, say, a long-range project of looking at potentially doing a pickleball court. That's still important, but it's more long-range, right? These are homeowners waiting to process. So from that perspective, it is critical, but it's not really every month. I'd say at most it's every other month, about 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to join that commission or committee, whatever we call it, subcommittee. And we know you're leaving. So there's someone that's going to slip right into your spot and take over. This seems like a very critical kind of job.
It is. I'm training our staff later this week to talk the ins and outs. I've been the only preservation planner for the city.
Ever.
Wow.
I did have some support from our previous senior planner, Antonio Gardea. He had a lot of experience from the city of Pasadena, and that was wonderful. But yeah, it's been primarily a program that I've been processing. So when we talk about reports, it would have been just me putting the reports together.
Thank you.
All right, and then also for the Volunteer Acknowledgement Committee,
Yeah, real quick, I just need someone to help me 1-2 hours a month to outreach to people who are volunteers or groups to get applications filled out. And that's what we're doing. Now, that's the main task, is to just reach out to the library or sports groups or beach cleanup, just to get applications.
I'm happy to join that.
Yeah, just need one person. Thank you. That'd be great.
okay.
Yep.
All right, so let's make the motion that we're going to have the 3 committee appointments, or of the 3 committees we've established, we're going to have the appointments. So for the facility users, we'll have Commissioner McCauley, myself, and then Commissioner Lang. For the minor alteration committee, we'll have Desiree, we'll have Commissioner Lang, and then for the volunteer acknowledgement committee, Commissioner Rowe and Commissioner Caldwell. Would somebody like to
Second,
second the motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to item K, member items and referrals to staff. We can go down the line. Commissioner Caldwell, do you have any member items and referrals to staff?
No items or referrals.
I would just like to share my goals of what I'm trying to accomplish. I am unfortunately the only person who served on the Library Commission. I'm also the only person up here who's served as on the Historical Commission. So coming into this year, I had some projects that we're working on, the Path of History markers, getting the Edo Park information signs up. Both of those have budgets, digitizing the Daily Breeze, which is moving forward, and the historical timeline in Dominguez Park, which you've already received some packets on in the context statement. What I would also be interested in doing, there was a person on the Historical Commission named Ilya Klinger, and his big goal was to have Wilderness Park designated as a historical landmark. So again, that's part of what I see as bringing the history outdoors, is to have we saw a couple of state historical landmarks, and that would be something to bring out. Ultimately, and it's not something that's going to be, I would propose for this year, but it's something that I think we've actually talked about, is consolidate the museum into the library under the direction of the library director. We heard that they need to hire a curator. The library needs a research librarian. It sounds like you can get more synergy by having one full-time person that does both and splits the time, so you have a part-time research librarian curator. You have an adult education person that also can contribute to it. And then you can have somebody be a full-time museum director. Our museum, and I encourage all of you to visit the museum, is so far behind Hermosa Beach and their museum, and we have a longer history on it. So I would love to be able to see that all roll into, have it as a library and museum with a director that can be splitting time with library projects, curating projects, directing projects, and come up with the vision for it. So that's not for necessarily right now, but before my 2 years are up, I would love to be able to see that happen. And this has been brought up in the historical meetings at one point, and we've talked about it, is we have all these historical buildings. We have, if you look in Veterans Park, you have little markers of people that have served as veterans. Why not have this embedded in the sidewalks, little markers of, it may not be a full-blown Mills Act kind of thing, but you could put something in the ground to recognize people or events that have happened at a specific event. So those are some of the goals that I want to accomplish on this commission.
I don't really have any referrals or recommendations. However, well, I'll just talk to you offline about it. I don't want to make it a commission thing, so. Pass.
Going forward, who from the city is going to be here every single month? You two?
Most likely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, most likely you can count on us.
Just curious if anyone else is going to join on certain,
Well,
dates.
obviously, if they have a specific item that
That's
they're bringing
major.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But otherwise, we'll be the one.
All right,
consistent.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we could get some information to share to the pickleball community as an update, because I don't want to be sending things around in my own words, and I'd rather it come from staff.
Yeah, I actually wrote a note to myself because as we were talking about the pickleball project, we do have a dedicated pickleball webpage. I think we can add a section on there that has updates on Alta Vista and aviation, and that can just be a resource that maybe monthly or whenever there's some actionable items, we can go on there and update it. That way you guys can check that out anytime.
Fantastic, thank
Yeah.
you.
Of course.
I'm good.
You're next.
Always
Good.
Good to see everybody.
Chris is always
We'll
good.
see you soon.
I had just a couple small things. For Kelly, the Dale Page Park signage for e-bikes, do we have any kind of status update on that?
No, I apologize. I had meant to, so from our previous meetings, Commissioner Yosef Tsai brought up a concern with e-bikes through that specific park. I meant to follow up with PD to just talk to them about some of their experiences as well as Public Works, because we were going to talk about signage or maybe even putting something on the concrete itself, on the pathways. And I just haven't reached out to them, but I'll circle back and make sure I have an update next month.
Okay.
Which park was that?
Dale Page. Okay, and then the only other thing I have is thank you guys. I know this is quite a lot and throwing it all at once too, so I appreciate all the presentations and the time to kind of get this commission off and running, so I appreciate it. Moving on to item L, adjournment. Would someone like to make a motion for adjournment? All in favor? Aye. All right.
Can you bang the gavel, please?
He's-